Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting for February 26, 2024. I will now call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. For a moment of reflection today, I wanted to talk about the coldest night of the year walk for homelessness. On Saturday in Wilmot, there were 181 walkers with 25 teams and 27 volunteers that helped raise nearly $54,000 to combat homelessness. The coldest night of the year walk takes place across Canada each February, and the Wilmot Family Resource Centre hosted our local Wilmot event, which was a really great turnout, and I know Councillor Martin and myself were both there, and Councillor Martin was actually a volunteer helping direct people during the walk. It was really great to see everyone who came out, and a huge congratulations to all of the fundraisers, and so proud to see our community raise almost $54,000 for homelessness and our local Wilmot Family Resource Centre. I will now turn it over to Councillor Cressman for our territorial land acknowledgement.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to one another and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you. We have quite a few additions to this evening's agenda. However, they all fall under either delegations for this evening or correspondence items. So I will ask for the adoption of the agenda with the additions as presented for February 26, 2024. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to any disclosures of pecuniary interest under the Conflict of Interest Act this evening, councillors? Seeing none. We do have minutes from the previous meeting, and that is February 12th, 2024 council meeting, as well as the February 15th special council meeting. May I have a mover and a seconder to adopt these as presented? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. As for presentations, we do have one this evening, and I will now invite Catherine Lindemann and Wanda Cakebread and Irma Friesen, who are here on behalf of Basic Income Waterloo Region, to begin. Please come on up, ladies, and you will have 10 minutes for your presentation, and thank you for joining us today.
Good evening, everyone. I was going to introduce us, but thank you for introducing us. And yes, we are members of the Basic Income Guarantee Waterloo Region that is promoting this. On the slides, you can see that guaranteed livable basic income is what we are trying to encourage, and have council also to support that. Okay, next. What is a basic income? A basic income is a direct payment from the government to ensure that everyone has sufficient income to meet basic needs, not luxury, participate in society, and to live with dignity regardless of their work status. And on this chart, you can see that the blue represents where people are earning income or have some other source of income, whereas the orange indicates the basic income. So as a person is able to, let's say, generate some income on their own, they're going to get less of the if you want to call it, topping up of the salary. So the first column there, where it's totally orange, it would be people who, for example, a stay-at-home mom. She doesn't get any income. Someone that I know personally who's a hairdresser, who's in her own business, Her daughter got very sick with almost terminal cancer. They think they're turning it around. But she had to leave her business, so she has no income now since September. So who knows, she may lose her home or whatever. So there are people who, in our midst, in all the communities, who either have no income or could use a little bit of a boost, depending on when you see the graph there. Okay. So a basic income is essential. A minimum wage falls way below the living wage. There's food insecurity, precarious jobs. Some people work for a contract, or their work situation doesn't last as long as they were promised. Poor physical or mental health often limits how much people can work or how long they can work. Poverty leads to a shorter lifespan. One of the reasons for that is if you're poor, the only food that you can buy that is cheap is snacks, junk food, carbohydrates. But the healthy food that would, promote health and a longer lifespan is out of reach for you. It also deals with unaffordable housing, and even to the extreme of the homeless, as it's increasing. And also inadequate social assistance, so that when you see what the amount that is there, in many cases, or most cases, it's still lacking. Okay, 1 in 5 children live with food insecurity. And I know my daughter's a teacher, and she has had to, at times, make an extra lunch to take it to school and discreetly sort of make it available to some child in grade 3, or someone who comes with a piece of bread without peanut butter or anything on it. That's the reality we're living in. Nearly 1/3 of Canadians say they don't make enough money to pay their bills, and their debts are increasing. And once you're in that hole, it just keeps getting deeper. 46% of Canadians report that they make only $200 a month, more than their monthly financial obligations are. So that would be the rent and paying, insurance or whatever. $200 a month is not a lot of money. And then 52% don't feel that they have enough money left at the end of the month to save for their retirement or for any other purpose. And precarious jobs. 47% of millennials do not have secure jobs, including 1/3 who are on short-term contracts, freelancing, or working through temp agencies. And surprisingly, many of them have a university degree, but they just don't fit into the labor market. Despite high levels of post-secondary education, only 44 millennials found permanent full-time employment. And underpaid low-wage workers provide essential service. And in many cases, that population cannot afford to have an apartment or a place to live on their own, and they need to return back to the parental home. Okay. And then the monthly income for an individual person on social assistance. I think you were going to speak to that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Wanda. So I'm Katerina Lindman. So there's the poverty line, $2,054 back in 2022, but Ontario Works is only $733, and if you have a disability and you're on ODSP, that would be $1,308. So it's way below the poverty line, and disabled people would have more expenses. Next slide, please. This is our family net wealth distribution by selected percentiles in Canada, put together by the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Office, and the top 1% have 24.8% of the wealth, and also the top 0.1% has a lot of wealth, 11.2%, and the very tippy top, 0.01% of those families have 5% of the wealth, whereas the bottom 80% only have 26.2% of the wealth. So there is wealth in Canada, but it's very unevenly distributed and weighted, I would say, too far up the top end. Next. If we do have a basic income, yes, we'd pay out more money from the government, but it would decrease costs in other areas that the government spends. Legal costs would go down, health costs would go down, and so would the costs for social services. It would vastly reduce the needs for food banks and homeless shelters. It would save on healthcare costs, and policing and correction costs would also go down. And this is some data from the Ontario Health. There's a pilot back in 2018 where the Wynne government tried out basic income. Unfortunately, it was canceled when the government changed. But 41.6% of people reported somewhat better health and 37.8% much better health after receiving basic income, because it just relieves a lot of stress, and people can focus on getting well again. Next slide. And then this is the change in mental health status. Again, very good results. About 30% somewhat better and 53.1% much better. Next slide. So basic income improves lives. It's a firm floor to stand on to live and thrive in community. Food security, health, mental health, housing, employment, and education. So now I'm turning it over to Irma.
Thank you. Okay. As she said, basic income improves lives, food security, health, mental health, housing, employment, and education. That actually happened to me. Health-wise, I injured my knees, couldn't work. That was a problem. So a firm floor to stand on to live and thrive in community. Next slide. Thank you. A basic income is doable. A basic income can be delivered efficiently, securely, and economically. Government's swift action in 2020 resulted in a substantial decrease in Canada's overall poverty rate. Federal emergency and recovery benefits mitigated the pandemic's impact for lower income populations. Next slide, thank you. Hugh Segal, a Conservative member. The wrong approach to ignore the problem, letting the ideological conceit at a rising time. Sorry, my vision isn't the greatest one, this one. Lifts all boats, obscure the hard reality that many Canadians have no boat or access to anyone who has ever had a boat. Next slide. A basic income is affordable. Cost for a national basic income plan estimated at gross cost of approximately $81 billion in 2022 Parliamentary Budget Office. Total net national cost of $40 to $50 billion annually, depending on the scope and details of the GBI plan implemented. Next slide. A basic income is affordable. How? By increasing taxes on the ultra-rich top 1%, address tax havens, $68 billion a year, close tax loopholes, $10 billion a year. Next slide. Summary. A basic income is needed, essential, doable, and affordable to ensure that everyone has sufficient income to meet basic needs, participate in society, contribute to the economy, and live with dignity. Last slide. The most important question we can usefully answer rich countries is not how to make them grow richer, but how to improve the quality of life of the average citizen. It may be one of the greatest challenges of our time, but we do have the resources. Thank you very much for having us here. And one thing I would like to note, I hope you've received your invitation, Mayor Stephen. There's a play that's going to be held on March 18th, where all the politicians are invited. And if you would like an invitation, I can get you one. No problem there. And I believe Candace has my email address, and she will gladly hand that over to you. Okay, thank you very much again for having us, and it was a pleasure being here.
Thank you very much, ladies, for your presentation. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I just wanted to thank the three of you for coming this evening and thank you for the opportunity to meet with two of you, Irma and Katrina, 2 weeks ago. And so, yes, I do plan on attending that play and appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just wanted to tell Rhonda that she did a great job. She lives in Morningside and had actually approached me on this, and I was not quite as receptive as she had hoped. But I do appreciate all the information that was given, and you guys did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Cressman?
So, through you, Mayor, so Lillian, you say it's all about Morningside?
I live there too.
Very good. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Seeing none, thank you again very much, ladies. And Irma, I know it's already in my calendar, so Candace did her job. Very good. This evening, we do have 5 registered delegations who wish to speak on matters listed on the agenda. We're going to go to those items, and once we hit the specific item that you've asked to delegate on, you will be called up to delegate individually. And in order to maintain a respectful and orderly environment during the meeting, I would just quickly go over and request that all delegates respect the following guidelines. To please not interrupt councillors, staff, or other delegations while speaking, refrain from making derogatory remarks about councillors, staff, or others, and do not use hate speech or defamatory comments. Although it is rare, I would like to remind delegates that failure to adhere to these guidelines may result in your microphone being muted or removal from the meeting. Please keep in mind that each speaker has a maximum of 7 minutes to address the council. And apart from that, like I said, we will call you up once we get to the corresponding part in our agenda. On to correspondence. Did anybody have any questions, comments, anything they wanted to pull from correspondence? Councillor Martin, and then...
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I would like to pull the correspondence from Rory Farnan.
And you may speak to that. That's item 9.1, correct?
Correct. Yes, through you, Mayor Salonen. So I was wanting to use this as an opportunity for an update publicly, wondering if Director Okrafka, if you're available to speak on it. I know that there is a public announcement on our website, and so the information is there. It's my understanding that this will be coming to our council meeting next week on March the 4th. Just wanted to confirm with you, Director Okrafka, if that information is correct.
Through your Mayor Salonen to Councillor Martin, that is correct. You gave my update. The matter is coming back March 4th. The report and recommendation of staff will be available on Wednesday with the council package, as is normal fashion, and that matter will be here next Monday night.
Very good. Councillor Martin again.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I appreciate that, Director Okrafka. It's hard to know what else to say. I know there are numerous things in the media. Sometimes the number of 4 years is used. It's my understanding that officially it's a year or less that the official application actually came to the township. And I'm not asking for you to say much about that, Director Okrafka, but if I'm saying something incorrectly, you're welcome to correct me, but otherwise, that's my understanding, is that when people in the news are using this number of 4 years, it's not accurate as I understand it.
Through you, Mayor Salonen to Councillor Martin. It is true that the application formally has only been in process for a year. It has been discussed for 4 years. I'd use the analogy, and to each their own in terms of how they interpret it. I'm going to use this, I told you it today. We talked about building a deck for 4 years. I built it last weekend. In my opinion, I built that deck in a weekend. In my wife's opinion, it took 4 years for me to build the deck.
I'm pretty certain that your wife is at home laughing as she's watching this meeting. All right, Councillor Wilkinson, I believe you had a correspondence item to pull.
Yeah, through the chair, it was actually to speak to the exact same item. I appreciate Councillor Martin bringing forth the update, and I was essentially going to comment on that. I think the important piece here is to know that, we are working with the City of Waterloo, and there's a lot of work happening in the background. So, hats off to both directors, Krafka and Moen Hughes, have been working away on that. I will say this much, in regards to what Mr. Farnan submitted as a letter here. I think there are some misconceptions and inaccuracies that are floating around in the media, so I would encourage any resident that has a question on it. I know we've received a number of emails and phone calls. Please do reach out to us, and I would encourage Mr. Farnan to reach out to his councillor or myself directly if you'd like to discuss the facts and what's going on. But I can assure you it's not as simple as Waterloo signing off on something. I would support them continuing to stay in their lane and worrying about their business while we worry about ours, and I won't comment on their business. So anyway, that is all.
Any other councillors wanting to pull a correspondence item or speak on the one that's already been pulled? Okay, seeing none, we will go on to our consent agenda item, which we do have our first delegate for this evening. Linda Lapel would like to address council regarding item 10.1, I believe it is, the annual water summary and quality. So thank you very much for joining us today, Linda, and you will have 7 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to speak out on this very important issue. My name is Linda Lepple, and I'm speaking to the water quality report that makes up 31 pages of tonight's agenda. The report repeats itself how it complies and meets regulations, but offers pages after pages of blank spaces in regards to test results. I'm here as a stakeholder since I host on my property a number of monitoring wells operated by the region and farm next to the wells K50, 51, 52 in a source water protected area and stand on guard for these waters. Attachment 2 of the report provides interesting numbers of water usage per month within the township, on average 100,000 cubic meters. I wonder if council, the owner of the water distribution system, or anyone reading this report looked at the explanation to what happened in March 23, when the report says usage was only 6,000 cubic meter. Not paying proper attention to water issues, not listening to people can be deadly to water systems and people. See Walkerton and Elmira. For one, anyone too young or too new to remember Elmira, watch the documentary Toxic Time Bomb. The responsibility for the essence that we need, water, is yours for a few years. The consequences cost us all and can last forever. Water reports can and should not be seen in an isolation, should not be prepared just to meet a requirement. After the flash rain that caused the Walkerton disaster, the Clean Water Act was developed. Too late for those who lost their lives. Common sense and looking at the whole picture is required to assess the risks. On this agenda are also region-wide initiatives. Bill 23, download of planning from region to lower tiers. One needs to ask if this will shift responsibilities for our water supplies. Or can one level of government plan for more housing and another level be expected to adapt to the extra demand without planning? Why are in this report blank pages for test results for organic and inorganic parameters? Is it because it takes 2 years for the region to publish their monitoring results? Due to Elmira no longer able to use its groundwater and the integrated water distribution system of Waterloo region needing to keep Elmira alive, is pumping water from the Shingletown well fields via the integrated distribution system all the way to Elmira. It's all connected. Short-sighted decisions have domino effects. According to regional reports, nearly 10% of the water from the regions come from the Shingletown well fields. Let me explain the domino effect that is bringing great danger to this well field and consequently water supply demands for all the new developments in the pipeline. The domino starts with the location of the monitoring wells. For cost savings, they are almost exclusively located along roads or farmers' laneway, 6 on my property. The Shingletown wetlands represents the exposed aquifer but there is no direct access and therefore was never included in any studies. The source water protection area line, oddly enough, excludes the wetlands by a few meters. Nitrate issues closed the well at the Sandhills Road-Gingery Road intersection. Nitrate has been a concern at the Shingletown well field, but levels have declined to next to zero over the last 10 years. But with your and the OLT's approval for a gravel pit with wash ponds in the water table and asphalt recycling next to the Espox aquifer, the dominoes started falling and could shut down the well field Wilmot's growth depends on. First, the application had an environmental site assessment done that was only valid for a few spots actually explored, not the entire property. No one cared. And the list goes on. A record of site condition filed with the ministry was accepted, reading the farmland is rezoned from residential to industrial, when in fact the farm used to be Ontario's largest feedlot, housing over 4,000 cattle without manure storage, but a manure lagoon, acres in size, and a well rated 600 gallons a minute, half the size of the regional wells that operates. All the environmental damages suffered by this farm have been blissfully ignored in the application process by all levels of government. The Safe Drinking Water Act requires that the municipality must acknowledge that the people of Ontario have a right to expect the safety of their drinking water and provide for the prevention of health hazards associated with drinking water by enrolling and regulating drinking water systems and conducting drinking water testing. When it comes to the Halma pit, with the stroke of a pen, you blew all our concerns and facts presented out the window and opened a floodgate to disaster. With the final signature on the document recently prepared by the OLT, giving final go-ahead to risk the water supply for thousands of residents, you make it a done deal. On my knees, I asked you to stop the devastating domino effect. Reconsider permission of asphalt recycling near the exposed aquifer from this deal. Consider permission of wash ponds in the water table, since the wash water is considered toxic sewage by the ministry. Ask the region that the Shingletown wetlands be included as soon as possible in the water monitoring program and results be made available to the public in a timely manner so we can adjust to our actions and in future, and be these results also included in the future annual summary reports like we have in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Councillors, any questions or comments of Linda at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Councillor Cressman, did you have a comment?
Yes, just on process, can I have questions on the report itself?
Yes, we can. That's my next part, was going to ask if anybody wanted to pull items from the consent agenda, so it sounds like you want to pull item 10.1. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, similar to the previous speaker, I did notice the abnormal reduction in water use, and I didn't know whether that was a Region of Waterloo monitoring issue because they run the meters on the wells. So that's question one. And question two, I went on Google Maps to figure out 2719 Sandhills Road. So where do we just, that's the yard where the equipment is stored. So how do we choose the locations where we test on our distribution system? Because the wells, as I understand, testing is the responsibility of the region.
Through you, Mayor. So it's obviously a multi-part question. I'll see if I can get everything for you. But in relation to the water volumes, so that's an administrative error in terms of the report being updated. So what was included with the council report was a different version than the accurate version. So it's a separate report, the summary report that we provide, and it is accessible at any point throughout the year. It's not just one that gets compiled for the purpose of of a council meeting, and is accessible by anybody that wishes to view the report in the public. And in relation to the water quality, I will answer that question as well, just in terms of what's provided in the water quality reports. So with the Region of Waterloo and the township in terms of jurisdiction, so we're responsible for the distribution system alone. We are not responsible for production or treatment of water. In fact, we do purchase it from the region as a treated water, drinking water. And so when we are required to report back on quality standards, we have a much more limited list of items to sample and to test. We do also have established locations around each system that we have to sample from, and so those are listed off within our quality management system. In some cases, when we do have repeated incidents, we'll say, those are usually looked at in terms of environmental issues. So for example, the facility, the yard you mentioned, that particular facility had an issue with the sampling port just because it has no environmental protection in terms of cover from rain. So there is an issue with the sampling location, and that's been resolved. And we do see that from time to time with sampling ports, obviously, when you deal with the environmental consideration and locations, that can come about depending on what, what's occurring at the location. So we do review our sampling locations for those types of activities as well. I believe that answers your question. If there are more, certainly can answer.
So just so I'm clear here, because for my swine operation, I am required to test water annually and have a record of what comes out the tap. You're talking when you test the little red or they're blue things that you pull a sample out, or the region pulls a sample out. Is that what you're talking of, as compared to coming out of a tap that would be coming into a home or a business?
Through you, Mayor. So so it's very similar. We have to do sampling at a number of different locations. It's the same idea. We grab a sample, so we take water from the system in sort of a tap type structure, but not necessarily like your kitchen tap, but it would be a port of sorts. And we do have to sample on a prescribed schedule. In some cases it's weekly, in some cases it's bi-weekly, and some can be quarterly.
Councillor Cressman again.
I'm just trying to figure this out. So how did you figure out that 31 Booley, New Hamburg had an issue as compared to 35 Booley? Or, I'm just trying to figure is this a random roll of the dice, or how
Through you, Mayor. So the sampling location will be in the vicinity of the address that's provided, but it's from our system. It's not, we don't enter homes to pull a sample from a kitchen. We do have our own sampling ports directly in our system. And so when we do a sample, that's actually sent to the Region of Waterloo quality lab. So there's a lab that we send every single sample to, and it's provided a fulsome review by the qualified personnel there, and then we are provided with a report. Essentially, that's what you're seeing with the water quality report. That's part of this council report that just verifies for you that that's occurred, and that this is essentially the compliance level in terms of the quality of water.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors, on item 10.1? Okay, seeing none. For item 10.1, may I have a mover and a seconder then? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And I actually had a quick question about item 10.2 myself, so I'm going to pull that from consent. Mr. Elliott, I was just curious on reading through the process, and I went to the Ontario sales tax website that you're talking about. So I'm just curious, when we put a property up for sale due to not paying taxes, is the minimum bid amount, does that cover all of our missed taxes, or how is that baseline number established?
That's an excellent question. Thank you. minimum bid price is set as the balance on the tax account at the time of the first advertising. So it's continuously evolves, but the minimum bid for the tax sale process is that includes all interest, all outstanding taxes on the account, together with all of our costs so far in the process, including the advertising that's now taking place.
Perfect. That answers my question. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Elliott, I did want to ask a couple questions on this because I always get concerned when you see that we're sort of stepping in to, well, sell someone's property to recoup costs for the township. So I guess two questions is, how many times did we attempt to contact the owner, and how many times did we contact the owner? So I guess that's question one, two parts. And then question two would be, what is standard or what is typical in a process like this?
Thank you. Again, this report actually is part of my process. It's not part of the regulated process. The purpose of this report tonight is first an education of the public about how we collect our taxes. It helps with compliance when everybody understands what we can do. This is the darkest piece of my work and part of my responsibility. It's the darkest part, and I don't enjoy it. The second function of this report is to ensure that everybody here in this room understand what we're about to be doing, and so that nobody's caught off guard. And the third part is perhaps someone in this room, someone watching, someone reading, knows of the owner or is of a relative of the owner and might be able to shake them. My past experience has been that oftentimes a person that's choosing not to pay their taxes despite the warnings, and I'll come back to your questions, may be suffering some mental, emotional, or other circumstances in their life, and it's a tax bill from the town. Put it in the closet, put it in the closet. None of their relatives understand what's going on. Only they do. So I have intervened in the past. I've attempted at this property. They received 2 formal registered letters, both to the owner and to the spouse of the owner. So that they've received that twice in the process, together with all of the previous tax bills and reminder notices that we would normally be sending. As well, last summer, our bylaw department hand-delivered and delivered to someone who actually handed it to a person on the property who claimed to be the owner on record. Don't know if they were or not, but yes, I'm the owner. Take it, thank you. And then just before Christmas, I attempted as well to hand deliver the same notice. And we know that there was someone in the property, the television was on, we could hear the footprints walking around, but they chose not to answer the door. We left it at the property. Those 2 visits are totally optional. But again, my experience has been, I knocked on a door once with a counselor, and unfortunately the lady was clearly trying to live independently when she shouldn't have been. Fortunately for us, the daughter walked up the driveway as we were leaving, and the next week we got payment and protected the interest in the property. We have no obligation to inquire about or seek market value for this property. That's the rules. I can't ask. So the minimum price is the minimum price. It's advertised right now. It's $35,300 for a 150-acre property. Not something I look forward to doing, but it is part of the process. And if I don't do it, these things continue to fester. I hope I answered your questions.
Councillor Dunstall?
Through you, Mayor, what happens to the additional? Does that go to the property owner, or does that go to the township? So if you have a bid of $35,000 and somebody purchases it for $200,000, what happens to the delta?
Excellent question. We take our piece, we settle the account, we issue a clear title to the owner, to the new owner, and then the balance is paid into the court, and it's up to the court to sort through those claimants who may have registered interests on the title of the property. So a first and second mortgage company might come forward if they exist, or the guy that built the deck and never got paid, he might be there lining up to the court. So it's up to the court to sort out who gets the balance of the money. If there's anything left over, the owner, the previous owner, would receive that.
I actually just was wondering if you could also clarify, I know the multiple times that you guys have gone to the property and the notices. I know when we were having a conversation about this before, you'd mentioned it's like 5 years, I believe, of not paying taxes. I'm just wondering if you could let the public know, like, it's not happening if you don't pay your bill once. If you could just elaborate on that process a bit, please.
Thank you. It used to be 3 years, but they've changed it now to 2 prior years. So if there's any balance of the second prior year of taxes or penalties owing, obviously I'm not going to do it if it's $40, but 2 prior years of arrears, then I can begin the process in the 3rd year. And we do it out of habit. Every year, we look at those documents, we issue warning letters, and sometimes in my past life, I've sent letters before I register the document. I send a second letter, one to the owner, and then a month later, one to his mortgage company if there is one. Usually, the mortgage company then pays within 2 weeks, and then about a month later, I get a change of ownership, unfortunately. The mortgage company can act much faster than I can.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments on this topic, councillors? Okay, seeing none, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive this item? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor, and that carries unanimously. On to our reports. Our first report is item 11.1, which is report CAO 2024-1, Office of the CAO Mayor and Council Staffing Resources to be received for information. To get this on the floor, may I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Martin, and I will now invite CAO Chambers to introduce the report.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. At the January 25th, 2024 Finance and Budget Committee meeting, staff was directed to report back to committee on contracted services and options to redistribute work within the Office of the CAO and any potential cost savings. This report provides information on the current staff complement within the Office of the CAO and the allocation of staff resources to support the Mayor and Council. I'll start by just giving a brief history on the staffing resources within the Office of the CAO and how they've evolved over the last 2 to 3 years. Prior to my arrival in Wilmot at the end of 2021, there were actually no dedicated staff support resources toward the CAO or the Mayor within the Office of the CAO. So the former CAO basically utilized staff within what was then called the Information and Legislative Services Department. So the clerk and clerk department staff as administrative assistants. And they also provided basic support to the Mayor and Council as well. After my arrival at the end of 2021, we seconded a staff member from corporate services to provide administrative support to the CAO and some limited support to the Mayor and Council in terms of scheduling and things like that. We also started work on a people plan. So at that time, I would say leading into 2022, we started to look to restructure the organization, and at that time, we reallocated the communications function, which was formerly under Information and Legislative Services under the Office of the CAO, and as well moved human resources from corporate services over to the Office of the CAO. And so that's how that has evolved. Communications was actually dealt with through a position called a communications specialist. They provided general communication support. They ran the township's communication social media channels. The website was sort of dispersed throughout the organization. Some staff within Information and Legislative Services operated the website, and we also had one staff member from the Development Services Department that was also supporting the website. So it was kind of a disjointed effort to maintain the township's website. So when we restructured, the social media or the communications specialist role became vacant shortly after it was transferred over to my office. And we looked at the overall communications function and felt that, we really wanted to package a new position that would incorporate all of the sort of technical components and day-to-day components of communication, like running the social media channels and running the website, into one position, with the goal of creating a higher level strategic communication position within the office of the CAO that would do that more proactive communication piece. So that position was created, and so I'll talk a little bit about what the current staffing resources looks like within the office of the CAO now. So in addition to the CAO, we have a new executive assistant that supports both the CAO and the mayor and council. Because this is a divided role, it does provide just sort of basic scheduling and some immediate administrative support to the mayor and CAO. But I would say there are gaps there because it is a shared position, and so it does have some capacity issues within that role. We also created that manager of communications and strategic initiatives role, and this is a role that is we're seeing more and more of being implemented in municipalities in recognition of the fact that there are more strategic projects that require support. They're corporate-wide projects, and I've implemented it in the past in other places that I've been with great success. I do find that it packages well with the communication function because you're looking at overall oversight for strategic planning, looking at those strategic goals of the municipality as we develop the strategic plan. When I've seen the role function in other municipalities that I've been in, they've pulled together all of the annual business plans, the master plans and things like that, and are really measuring out on the process, reporting out on progress on those strategies. And it packages well with communication because then we're able to communicate to the community on what we're doing, but we're also engaging with the community and getting feedback into what the community wants. So this position is something that we're more commonly seeing and can really advance the township. Under that, we still do have the social media, digital, and design specialist role. We have evolved that a little bit since Ms. Kell has been in the role, and it is still vacant, but it really does package not only those day-to-day more tactical communications, but also looks to the website and also doing the sort of design work so that the documents and things that we're preparing have a professional look to them. I won't really get too much into the manager of health and safety and human resources. I think, those are sort of self-explanatory, and I don't think there's a lot of opportunity to reallocate those resources, and I'll focus more on the three roles that were just discussed. So in terms of council's request, one of the things that I thought would be beneficial was to do a needs assessment of the various roles, including the mayor and council, to understand what support needs there were. And so I did engage with the mayor. We've been having ongoing conversations about what her needs are. And, essentially she needs support for calendar management, political communications, conference and travel management, responses to constituents, preparing speaking notes for various events, doing some research and writing, and event management. So things that you would typically see a mayor doing, having a mayor's breakfast or a State of the Township event, that would be sort of a political need. As far as council, the political communications, research, conference travel management, and constituent responses. And then for myself, some higher level support, not only on the scheduling front and customer service for my department, but really managing the day-to-day emails, documents, and records management, assisting with report writing and research, internal communications, and conference and travel management, and some of the financial pieces too in helping with budget research, compiling and monitoring the budget, and project management support is what I require. We also do require some support for the corporate leadership team. Our executive assistant does attend all CLT meetings, and they track actions and follow up with that and help with internal scheduling with the team. In terms of communications, I see that divided really in two realms. One is the more strategic communications that we spoke of, and that really focuses on those longer term goals and or overarching objectives like media relations, issues management, crisis preparedness. And so that's really looking at our emergency management plan and ensuring that we're prepared for, emergencies and having a proper plan and communication in place for those possibilities. And then the community and stakeholder engagement is also a strategic piece. We need to look more towards communication and social media strategies so that we're being more proactive and thinking ahead about what we're doing rather than being reactive. And also the business plan development and progress reporting. On the tactical communication side, that's really that day-to-day immediate tasks required to support those goals. So the social media, the website back end, which is a more technical piece, and requires that technical skill. And we're also looking to develop an intranet and maintain an intranet for effective communications so that documents and policies and things like that can be readily accessible for staff. I did go into quite a bit of the work plan for the Office of the CAO. I won't go over that in detail, but there are quite a number of strategic projects within the Office of the CAO this year, as well as within human resources. And the CAO's office does support all the corporate-wide initiatives that are being led by other departments. So often we have a project team, and the CAO would be involved in those project teams as well on the corporate-wide initiatives, and there's quite a number of those. There are a lot of region-wide initiatives ongoing this year. Certainly Bill 23 and download of planning from the region to the lower tiers, and Bill 39 regional governance review has been a significant body of work for CAOs across the region this year as we research and make recommendations on what the future of governance looks like in Waterloo Region, and also planning for the download of planning and the implementation steps that would be required for that. We do work with the 4 townships on a number of initiatives, and also supporting mayor and council in government relations and policy work as we advocate to the senior levels of government for funding and various other items. So my observations in looking at the current structure is that we do have those two communications roles, one more strategic and also to support those strategic projects, but we really haven't had that structure fully implemented as of yet. One of those roles has always been vacant, and so we really haven't seen how it can operate effectively at this point in time, because Ms. Kell is operating at both the strategic and tactical level right now and trying to provide project support. And so we're really finding a gap there. Throughout 2023, the Office of the CAO has really faced persistent staff vacancies. And, in this recruitment environment, it's been very challenging. We find that when we have vacancies, it's taking a longer time to fill those roles, and often we go through multiple cycles of hiring before we're successful. So of the roles that I spoke of that were vacant, We've seen vacancies as long as 7 months while we were trying to recruit for those positions, and that has really impacted the operational effectiveness of the office of the CAO, which requires me often to be very operationally focused when we have those vacancies. And in addition to that, the township really has been undergoing significant organizational transformation and modernization since 2022. We've restructured the corporate leadership team, we've realigned services under new departments, we've brought a lot of new talent on board, and in terms of our future goals and modernization, everything's on the table. We're looking at new processes, we're looking at recruiting new leads into our finance division, we're looking at updating our budgeting processes. And so as we go through this transition, that also does require me to be more operationally focused as I support the team through this transition. I will say, for the 2.5 years that we've been at this work, I'm very pleased with our progress. It is challenging to look at a large municipal corporation that has been going in a certain direction with leadership for 20 years and to make a significant shift in direction. And I'm so pleased with the way staff have responded to the change and how they're really pulling together and embracing the change and wanting to look to the future in a new way. So I just wanted to offer some kudos to the staff for the work that they're doing as we evolve this organization. In terms of mayor and council, we're also seeing an evolution of the needs of mayor and council. Each new council is different. Mayors have different skills, mandates, desires. Councils do as well. They come on board with a new mandate, and that requires resources to be able to respond to that. And so, even for Mayor Salonen, we're seeing her connections provincially. It really allows us to do more advocacy, and that requires more support. And as far as, developing those briefing notes, we've attended many delegations and have done a lot of advocacy work since Mayor Salonen has been on board. And the mayor has expressed the need for a dedicated staff person to support her and council. So considering the needs assessment that is outlined in this report, I've concluded that reducing the staff complement within the office of the CAO would significantly impact the operational effectiveness of the office and the ability to advance key priorities. So I'll review some of the options that I put forward. And the first option is to implement a dedicated staff position by approving a constituent liaison position reporting directly to the mayor and council. This would be an increase in staff complement of 1 full-time equivalent, and this would offer optimal support to both the mayor and the mayor and council in the office of the CAO, because we would each have our own dedicated staff position. It would increase the maximum capacity for communication and engagement by maintaining that full staff complement within the communications division and provide that increased support for advocacy. One of the downfalls of that is it's the most expensive option. So there are additional costs due to the addition of 1 full-time equivalent. One of the considerations that I think are important when you're implementing a role that is strictly reporting to the political realm is that there needs to be a division between the political functions and the corporate functions. And I did speak to some of the larger cities. The city of Kitchener provided some feedback on this because they do have political staff and administrative staff, and it's very important for good governance to understand where those lines are drawn. And it takes a lot of goodwill between the CAO and mayor and council to understand and respect those areas. So things that we would see as political tasks and where a new role could support would be creating council newsletters and communications, speaking notes, quotes for media releases and constituent responses, scheduling and event management for the mayor and council, where corporate tasks are really those corporate communications functions, so media releases and media relations, even though, the mayor and council will be providing quotes for those really are corporate functions. The crisis communications is also a corporate function, and the policy support and advocacy, that is something that would be done in conjunction with the CAO's office and the mayor's office to ensure that we're very aligned in setting that vision as we advocate to senior levels. So the financial implication of this would be approximately $125,000 per year, and that would include salary and all of the employment-related costs, IT requirements, travel, conference attendance. And so if council chooses to move forward with this, the next step would be to finalize a job description and ensure that we are evaluating that to confirm the salary range and then post the position. One of the other considerations that council could have, because it does support the political function, is that it could be a contract position that aligns with the term of council if council so chose. The second option is to implement a dedicated staff position by approving the constituent liaison position reporting directly to the mayor and council, but eliminating the vacant social media, digital, and design specialist role and contracting out the technical communication needs. This would provide the optimum support for the mayor and council, but would reduce staff resources allocated to corporate communications and project support within the office of the CAO. And the manager of strategic initiatives and communications would continue to simultaneously handle those strategic and tactical communication tasks, which would really diminish her ability to support my office in those strategic projects that we have on our plate in the coming year. Within the existing executive assistant role, there would be some additional capacity if that was implemented to handle a little bit of additional support, but I do strongly believe that it would still leave the office of the CAO short-staffed and reduce our ability to meet those strategic projects and goals, and to really move forward with a more proactive communications function within the township. It is lower cost than adding a full-time equivalent, but it is increased cost over the current approved staff complement. The difference in the role itself would be about $100,000 to remove that social media, digital, and design specialist role. That would include all of the employment-related costs as well. But I strongly believe we would need to contract some additional support for website backend and some of those technical requirements for the role. And I'm estimating about 10 hours per week at a cost of about $25,000. So this would be about a $50,000 impact. The third is to maintain the existing staff complement within the office of the CAO and really maximize the roles that are there to see if we could provide a higher level of support to both the mayor and council. It would provide some enhanced support to the mayor and council, and in this situation, we could look at the job description for the social media, digital, and design specialist to see if they could provide a little bit more support to mayor and council with communications, newsletters, event organization, promotion of events, those types of things. And so there is an opportunity, since that role is currently vacant, to modify that job description, and this would also create some additional capacity within the manager of strategic initiatives role and allow them to provide also enhanced communication support to the mayor and council, and as well, we would update the job description and skills and experience requirements for the executive assistant role, and that could also be enhanced to attract an individual with skills in the area of document preparation, research, and technical writing. So that's sort of utilizing and enhancing the current structure to provide greater support. And then the fourth option As directed by council, you wanted to see some options for saving some money. I did provide that, although it's not recommended, and that would be to eliminate the social media, digital, and design specialist role and continue to operate below the full staff complement within the office of the CAO, and that really doesn't provide adequate support to the mayor and council, and it reduces the ability to advance those strategic projects. And again, we're going to be more reactive in terms of the communication function that we can provide. That really does conclude my report, and I'm happy to take any questions from council. I did just have this report for information purposes. Unless council provides me with some specific direction, then we would be considered moving forward with status quo, which is option number 3, which is, maintaining the current staff complement, because we don't need direction to do that. It's already approved. So with that, I will turn it over to the mayor and council for questions and debate.
Thank you very much, CAO Chambers. I have been told that Councillor Dunstall has been lost to us somewhere in the internet. I've been told that we would need to recess in order for her to be able to reconnect to Zoom. So if I could ask if council would be willing to recess so that Councillor Dunstall may join us for this discussion. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, second by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries unanimously, and we will be back. It should be about 5 to 10 minutes is what I'm being told by our staff. So hopefully we will have Councillor Dunstall live when we come back. All right, thank you everyone for that recess. I will need a motion to reconvene. If I could have a mover, moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Dunstall, because you can hear me now. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Councillor Dunstall, sorry about the technical error. My understanding though, for those viewing on YouTube, our live stream was still working the whole time. It was unfortunately tech on our end kicked the councillor out of our room. So thank you for bearing with us, everyone. And Councillor Dunstall, we now have you back. Just to update you, in case you didn't catch all of the YouTube stream, CAO Chambers just finished reviewing her report, which you've already read, and we were just going to head into the discussion of council, and then we went to recess, and now we're back.
Yeah.
So
yes, I did. I was able to follow on YouTube.
Wonderful. So having said all of that, councillors, any questions? Councillor Cressman.
So through you, Mayor, to CAO Chambers, how difficult is it for somebody to wear, well, I guess in the firefighting world, it's a two-hatter, to be commenting or communicating both from a political point of view and a corporate point of view? I mean, that's to be honest, this is the first in reading your report it ever struck me that there would be a divergence. I'm so used to being, if you're a board member, it's corporate, so anyhow.
Yes, and so I think that's why you typically see these types of positions in larger municipalities where, the mayor, is a full-time role, not to say that that's not the case here, but it is more common for larger municipalities to have a whole, a numerous political staff that are supporting the mayor and council. We don't see it as much in smaller municipalities, but I think, things continue to evolve, and I think it should be based on what the need of the council, the current council is.
Any other questions or comments at this time, councillors? Councillor Cressman.
I realize we're receiving this this evening and not making a decision, but would we not have a better idea if these positions were filled and functioning for a period of time before we could really make a decision about the appropriateness of adding additional FTE? Now, I know I've talked to the mayor about this. She has a differing opinion, and that's, she certainly, I don't know what her day looks like. I only know what my day looks like.
Through you, Mayor, I think we really can't assess how the current structure is functioning because it's never been filled. I have seen it filled in other municipalities, and it does function effectively. But again, this is why I haven't made a recommendation other than saying that I would prefer to keep all of the roles within the office of the CAO because I feel that is needed to be able to meet the work plan and the requirements of our office. But I also think that, it would be beneficial for council to discuss what your own needs are, and if council felt that there was an additional need for staff support to directly the mayor and council, then that would a decision would be required to be able to incorporate that into the budget in 2024.
So I'm happy to chat about and answer that as well, as I do know that I was certainly the driving force behind this. One big part I would say is that an inherent flaw in the structural review is that it failed to look at council and mayoral needs. So even if we were to fill the current vacant position, it doesn't actually address direct support for council and for myself. In terms of looking at my role, I mean, I will be honest, and there are people in the community who are frustrated with my slower turnaround times in terms of I can't physically respond to 300 emails a day, which is about what I average in terms of what needs responses, and they don't stop on weekends, they don't stop on evenings. I'm not complaining about my role at all, but I do want to ensure that I am actively getting back to people and getting them the effective responses, because as you know, many times people will go directly to council instead of going to staff, which is perfectly fine, but wanting to make sure that that's all managed. I also think as well, we're expecting a lot of growth and great opportunities coming forward, and I think that more support to council and myself would be very effective. We're also, my understanding, the only municipality in the region that does not currently have someone who, whether their staff is political or they're on the administrative side, who part of their job is dedicated to helping with constituent correspondence. And I think one that can help with consistent, effective messaging and communication back to the community versus hearing one thing from one councillor and something opposing information from another councillor and then a staff member saying something completely different. I also see this as something important in terms of looking down the future for good candidates coming forward and knowing that there is a supportive role for people who one day want to be in any of our seats. I think that when there are roles that are supportive, that are directly for mayor and council, you see better candidates usually apply for the position, especially when the roles, technically all of our roles are deemed part-time. I recognize that I do mine full-time between regional and this. But we are seeing with social media and just easier access and in general council being out in the public more, that there is more of a expectation of the community of council, and I want to ensure that those expectations are met. And having that with the reality, I do believe that adding an additional position for council and mayor will help support all of that and manage those expectations. In terms of the political versus admin that I know that CAO Chambers mentioned and her report discussed, there are lots of municipalities in ranging sizes that do have political staff, and as long as it's clearly outlined in the roles that are defined, it doesn't seem to be a problem, and in fact can support both roles, and in some cases can take off workload. For example, I know in Stratford they have a similar position. They're about 10,000 people more than us now, but they're also a single tier, so slightly different. But for council and mayor, they go directly to that person, and then that person goes to staff to get answers that they need, versus right now, I know that we end up in our lovely CLT's inbox very often, and they're wonderful at responding to us, but we are not their primary job, and usually they're just a point person. So being able to alleviate workload on our CLT so that they can focus on directing their departments as well. And then as well, because for council and myself there would be communication support, I would be leaning towards option 2, because with that support, I don't necessarily think that there is that full need for another FTD, although it would be wonderful. We also know the budget constraints that we're all facing, and I think that that's a luxury item to have that second staff person. I do think that the admin support for CAO Chambers, as she mentioned, could be reworked a little bit. Again, we see, like over in Woolwich, the admin assistant to the CAO also does a very large portion of their communications, including web design, and she does report writing and fulfills a lot more than what the current role offers. And if they wouldn't have to do my calendar scheduling and a few other items for me, I think that there could be scope added to that role to kind of buff up and deal with the gap in that one position. I do understand and appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Cressman, of hiring the full suite of what's in the current existing plan. My point is, I mean, one, it doesn't address council and mayoral needs, and two, I think that with supporting council and mayor, then we can look at other ways to support those gaps in that area right now. So I would suggest option number 2. I believe for me to bring it forward, I would have to bump the chair over to our interim chair this evening, which is, which is Councillor Wilkinson. So Councillor, would you mind stepping in his chair for a moment?
Through the chair, I accept the position of chair. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair Wilkinson. I would bring forward a motion to proceed with option number 2.
Okay, that's on the floor. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. So, with that said, are there any additional comments on this? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Chair Wilkinson, I must say I'm not sure that I'm ready to endorse option 2. I see it as an additional expense to our budget. I think if we would go with option 3 and have the full staff complement, it would give us a chance to see. I realize, Mayor Salonen, your point of view is different, and we chatted this afternoon, and I respect your opinion, and I do not want to detract from what would be helpful to your role. But that's the quandary that I'm in right this minute. If we're going to vote in a minute or two, maybe I'll vote something different, but right this minute, I'm not sure that I could support it.
Councillor Dunstall, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I've been bouncing between 3 and 2, and I just wanted to double check something with the CAO Chambers, and actually with Mayor Salonen. The recommendation is that this position is a temporary one, and that that the role that it would be replacing would be brought back for consideration in 2025. So is that what the motion is here, is that this is a temporary role and that we will be looking at the other role again in 2025 budget?
So I'm open to the scope of this role being either contract to the end of a certain date. I would recommend after this council so that it gives a transition person should council change at the next election or there be changes at the next election. But also I do see it functioning fine as a full-time permanent position. In terms of the reassessing come 2025, if that's an ask that staff bring forward, of course, staff always are able to bring back. And I think it would also give us a year to assess what that actual need would be having this other role filled.
To Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I'm with Councillor Martin in terms of indecisive on this one. I see where it would be of assistance as a two-finger typist. I love the idea. I really would like to see something in black and white that would show how the political is different than the corporate. I think I need to, for me to make a decision on this one, I have to see how those two roles would differ. I guess I've tried to wean myself off of any political concepts over my years on different boards, because I always saw that if you're making a decision for political reasons, it's the wrong decision. You have to support the corporation, the organization, and all that is required to ensure it survives and is there for the next people who would step in the chair. So I think I have to be true to myself, I have to really look at this and see that maybe this is something in the short term that I would have to stay with my first feeling on this, that would look at option 3 is get all the positions filled, evaluate their performance over time, and if this is then brought forward for 2025 budget, I'm willing to consider it with a little more information and trying to teach an old dog new tricks at this stage in his political career.
To Councillor Sadhu.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wilkinson. Yeah, I've been bouncing the ideas around in my head. I think the word political is coming off a little scarier than it should be. I mean, at the end of the day, we are politicians. And for me, I look at it as a chance to enhance our customer service to our residents. I know there is times where I'm busy with my business, with my kids, and I don't have time to get onto social media and do my social media posts. And unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, we do live in a world where we need to get ourselves out there and communicate more, and like I've been trying, but I see this as a position that can help us engage further with our residents, whether it be through newsletters or further communication or helping set up town halls. Oftentimes, we get kind of stuck in our echo chamber and we just talk to the same people. But through this, through having a communications person that is supporting council and mayor, I do think this could help further provide more customer service to the residents so they are more aware of what is going on. I mean, oftentimes I hear from residents about Councillor Dunstall's newsletter, and they said this is great. They're getting information. They're able to stay in tune with what's going on. I am in favor of option 2. I mean, it's a position that's already in here that it's not so much we're eliminating, but we're just changing the scope of it. There would still be help with social media, digital design. Additional contracting out technical support for website and internet. I mean, kind of wary of if it needs to be 10 hours a week, but this could be an ongoing fluid situation where we can kind of see where we need to grow and pull back on. But me personally, I would vote in favor of option number 2, just for the simple fact of it. I believe it can help further the customer service experience with our residents.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Chair Wilkinson, I wanted to clarify, if we would go ahead with option 2, we're then eliminating the position of the social media, digital and design specialist role. So then on the staffing complement, there would be one position less. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Through you, Acting Chair. It would be 1-for-1, essentially. So it would be reallocating resources that support the Office of the CAO to Council. The Office of the CAO does currently provide some support to Council, but overall, it would be reducing the amount of support to Ms. Kell and myself.
I wanted to say through the chair, but I suppose I am chairing this portion of it. So I had some thoughts as well, and I'm inclined to agree with a lot of the points that have sort of been brought around the table. To start, I mean, I looked at this and looking at the tough budget year, I was immediately inclined to think that we should probably find a way to scrap it all and save the funds. But then having a couple thoughts about it, I wondered if there are potential advantages to continuing on down the path of either having one or the other. I don't think certainly we could accommodate both at this time, but when I'm looking at it, I think option 2 is something that's attractive to me for a variety of reasons. I'm inclined to agree with what my colleague here, Councillor Sadhu, has mentioned in terms of customer service or better relations with constituents. And I think one of the things is, yes, this position is sort of viewed as a part-time role, but I find sometimes the expectation of constituents is that we are available more often through the day or for immediate response. So I understand that, and I certainly, as someone who was on the other side as a constituent, I'd wondered why sometimes you get delayed responses back or not often
able to speak to someone immediately. So I think from the perspective of that we're providing greater engagement and greater communication efforts to constituents, the hope is that what would come out of it is that we're getting a broader range of opinions, and also ensuring that messaging is received and also given. And something that I've advocated for in the past would be newsletters to let people know what's going on. And I think that would be something that could potentially be achieved through a position like this, where we would have support directly to council and mayor to help provide messaging, provide information about what's going on, where we'll be, what we're maybe seeking feedback on. Because I agree, sometimes we can get stuck in you only hear from the same people over and over and over again, or you're only able to contact so many people, and it doesn't necessarily always provide a broad spectrum of opinions. So I think it's important that maybe be further pursued in a position like this. I did have a question for CAO Chambers, and then as well, Mayor Salonen, but I guess first to CAO Chambers. So this is a position that does exist in other municipalities, so it's common to see political motivated staff or staff that are supportive of the political body of a municipality. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I would say it's typically in larger municipalities than ours, but it is a position that is seen, yes.
To Mayor Salonen, is this something, I mean, you said you'd sort of reached out to the other municipalities within the Waterloo region, or the region of Waterloo, excuse me, and you're suggesting that this is a position that exists at every municipality except ours?
So I was not saying this position. That point when I was talking is that there's somebody's role has in their job description constituency correspondence that they help with. So there is support to council and staff. It does not, in most cases, I believe actually outside of the cities, it does not exist in this particular capacity as its own standalone. It's usually through an EA role, but it does vary across the area, but there is support that it is written in someone's job description, not just in right now and non-existent in Wilmot / maybe an add-in on the side of someone's desk if we ask staff for some support and messaging on a particular issue.
And to Mayor Salonen, I mean, is this a position where you would see potentially an individual would take it upon themselves to sort of seek a variety of opinions from council or mayor to provide feedback to media or constituents as it sort of comes in regarding questions and a request for commentary? Is that sort of the idea that potentially could exist?
So it could, but it's completely up to council as to what we want that role to be. In terms of this individual would be reporting to council and myself. So if that's the expectation that we want of them, it could also be separate arrangements. If one councillor says, yes, I'd like you to deal with my media releases or media inquiries in this fashion, then they could do that, and that might be separate from what another councillor requests, but they would be that resource for council. I think Councillor Dunstall also has a question.
Prior to going to Councillor Dunstall, I'm just going to go to CAO Chambers, who wanted to chime in there.
And through you, that goes back to the political versus corporate. So media relations, media releases, those types of things, corporate. And, you know, in order to ensure effective governance, there has to be a clear understanding of that those would be still led out of the office of the CAO through the corporate communications function. Councils, you know, does have a role in media as well, in terms of, you know, we would assist with the corporate messaging. There would be the mayor as the spokesperson of council has a role, but it's corporately delivering the corporate message. So there is a nuance between political messaging and corporate messaging, and it's very important to understand that.
Surrender the chair. She's waving at you.
Is that it? No, I haven't. Oh, okay. Can I go to Councillor Dunstall first, or did you want to follow up on that? All right, Councillor Dunstall, I'm going to allow Mayor Salonen here to chime in as a follow-up, and then I'll go to you.
Yes, although I do agree that there's media releases, and that would obviously be done through your office. When council or myself are asked for a quote in the media or asked for a comment on something, that is something that I'm talking about this role doing. That would be the nuance between political versus corporation. That is what we already, many of us have had to field over the last year and a bit. That is the role that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the person saying this is what the Township of Wilmot wants. It would be, Councillor Wilkinson, you got this media request from so-and-so asking you this question. How can I support you in that? Just to clarify.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure that if we did go with option 2, that technical piece I think is really important. I know that the township has been working with tools that are pretty inadequate and come from centuries where I was starting my career. So I just wanted to make sure that that stays intact, because I don't think that we can have our people do the best they can when we don't supply them with the proper tools.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Chair Wilkinson, am I correct in understanding then that essentially we're eliminating a position? If we're going back over the last number of years, there has been the 2 positions, the manager of communications as well as the social media, digital and design specialist role. This is not a new position, right?
So pass to CAO Chambers there for response.
So this position that council would consider eliminating is a position that has existed. It's evolved a little bit, but it's actually the manager position that is new and deals with those more higher level strategic pieces of communication. As a last ditch effort to advocate for the support that I need within my department, I would like to point council back to the work plan for the year. There is a significant project workload within the office of the CAO that requires support. It is the intended role of the manager of communications and strategic initiatives to support that. And so without this role, she would have to be more tactically focused, and that would take away support from my office as we move forward with strategic projects. And I think, there's more than what's listed in the work plan, and I think council is aware that there are a number of initiatives that are more confidential in nature that will require a significant focus for this office over the coming year. That being said, I fully understand and recognize the support that council is seeking, and it's been very challenging over the past year and a bit since council has been on board. As you're coming in with your new mandate and you want to see things moving forward, and there hasn't been capacity within the organization to be able to address your needs, and I recognize that, and it's been a struggle for my office to provide that support as well. A lot of it has been because we've been short-staffed almost most of the year of 2023.
Just to comment on that there, CAO Chambers, I appreciate where you're coming from. Yeah, it's difficult with the staffing availability or the resources available, but it's not our needs in particular, right? We are looking to advance the needs and the ideas and the desires of our community. We're here to represent individuals, and a lot of them have a lot of great ideas that they put forward and want to see us champion as well. So, I think from my perspective, while I can appreciate there are a lot of things that are on the current plate for the corporate leadership to digest and work through, I think at the end of the day, who we're all responsible to and who we all work for is essentially the people of Wilmot. So I will say in favor of sort of looking at option 2, I mean, if this is a position that could potentially help advance the agenda of the people of Wilmot and see us fulfill some of their goals, and it could potentially take some pieces off your plate as well, then I see it as a net, as a potential benefit here. So I think in thinking it through and maybe even having this conversation, maybe we do look at it from a contract perspective to try it out, see how it works, and then through to 2025, when the time comes, we can look at potentially expanding it. That may be food for thought there. I don't know if anybody has an opinion on that. To Councillor Dunstall and then Mayor Salonen.
Thank you, Stu, Mayor. I just, I appreciate all these conversations because I change my mind probably 5 times while I'm having these conversations and listening to everybody's point of view. And I agree with you, Councillor Wilkinson, but I also think that that's not being fair to the CAO. I mean, if she believes that she needs that extra staff and that they won't be working at the best capacity, then that certainly affects our constituents as well. To keep the township running properly is what they want. So I think we have to keep that in mind too. That it's not just us that they depend on. The people at the township actually do the work. We're just the face. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Mayor Salonen.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just on your point, Councillor Dunstall, I definitely agree, and it's not that I want to take away resources from the Office of the CAO. I would say that they already have increased support in the role that Ms. Kell now has, which is support that didn't exist prior, and it's a larger scope in work and in expertise. So I would say they already have that increased support, as well as the option to take the current existing EA position, which was in part supporting my calendar, and re-envisioning that role, because that does need to go out. Right now it's just on a temporary fill-in basis. That does need to go back out at some point, so I think that we could fill the needs of the Office of the CAO through that and role by expanding it, which, like I said, that exists in other municipalities of our size, that scope in an EA to do some other more tactical groundwork, social media posts, and the items essentially that they're talking about for this role that in option 2 I'm proposing to not have in this budget go forward. I would also say we've removed from other areas staff asks as well, and again, those all tumble back to helping the community. So I think that having a dedicated resource to council would really help support our side, because I know a lot of us like the newsletter, for example. It's fantastic that you're able to do yours, and I know it's really liked, and people would like to see that on a larger scale. So even examples like that. And another one that I think has been missed in a lot of this conversation too, apart from the summary that CAO Chambers did, was the political advocacy at other levels as well, I think is important. And when we're seeing federal and provincial funding tending to go to areas that do have government relations positions, because they're the ones who can speak to the people listening, I think from politically positioning Wilmot Township in the best option, if we had someone who's able to be a bit more political, then they can help us further that advocacy that right now staff are doing their absolute best, and I know that you guys are supporting us as you can, but I think if there's somebody who this is their role, then they can help push those objectives forward too, and we could maybe one day see that funding trickle down too.
CAO Chambers.
Yes, and just through my engagement with the City of Kitchener, that is one area where they said they really ensure that there is a focus still within the Office of the CAO in developing that policy work and advocacy work, so that it's not, strictly political, that it is dealt with through the Office of the CAO. Certainly this position could provide some research and support that way. But I think it's very important to ensure that we're aligned with the Office of the CAO on those sorts of initiatives.
Any final comments? No. Okay. So we'll call the vote. I believe the motion on the floor, I'm looking at Director Bunn here. If you don't mind just recapping.
Thank you, Chair. So through you, this really is an amendment. It's been framed as a motion, but it should be an amendment. So I would suggest that the amendment would be something along the lines of that council support option 2 as outlined in CAO report CAO 2024-01 to support, let me just flip to that actually page here. Apologies. To support the implementation of a dedicated staff position by approving a constituent liaison position reporting directly to the mayor and council and eliminating the vacant social media design and digital specialist role and contracting out technical communication needs.
Mayor Sallin, is that agreed? That's the amendment we were voting on?
Yes, unless if you wanted your friendly amendment added of making it a contract position. But I would have to look if you actually wanted that as a friendly amendment, and then you'd have to look to my seconder if there was support.
Sure, can I do that as chair, add that as a friendly amendment?
Through you, Chair, it would be the mover and the seconder who would just have to agree to it if they're okay with those terms.
Is that agreed by the seconder? So, to recap, we are voting on adding option 2 here, essentially changing the scope of the position, still one position, and looking at it from a contract perspective. So, Councillor Dunstall?
Was I the seconder?
I believe it was Councillor Sadhu.
You were frozen.
It appeared to be frozen at the time. So I will call the vote at this time. So all in favor of the amendment? Okay. And all opposed? Okay. And that carries 4-2. So I will relinquish the chair back to Mayor Salonen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilkinson, for chairing. My clerk. Okay, so now we are voting on the main motion as amended. So I will call the vote as we've had ample discussion. All those in favor?
Can we just clarify that? What are we voting on now?
I'm going to pass to the clerk, but it is the main.
Through you, Mayor, this would be the main motion, which was just amended. I don't have the exact text of what the amendment was, but we'll have the recording of that. Essentially on the lines of that the report CAO 2024-01, Office of the CAO Mayor Council Staffing Resources be received as information, and further that Council approve option 2. I can't recall exactly what I just told you, but we will get the wording correct. Option 2, which is outlined in CAO report CAO-2024-01, and that would be to, I'll go back to that wording again, to implement a dedicated staff position by approving a constituent liaison position reporting directly to the mayor and council and eliminating the vacant social media, digital and design specialist role and contracting out technical communication needs. And there is the friendly amendment that adds on the caveat that this be a temporary solution and that the social media design and social media digital design specialist position and the constituency liaison be reconsidered in 2025.
Sorry, Councillor Martin, I forgot that I was back to chairing.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Salonen, so if I vote in favor of this, then I'm voting in favor of the amendment that has been approved. Okay.
That is correct, yes. All right, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, just to clarify, so essentially the amendment was to replace the receipt for information. So that's essentially what we're voting on now.
Yes, that is correct.
Through you, Mayor, it doesn't replace it, it just adds to it. So you've received the report as information and now you're approving option 2.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, so can I not say thank you for the information, but doesn't mean that I'm in favor of the previous amendment that we voted on. Like that's so by voting against it, I'm just not trying to vote against the information we've received. It's about the decision, correct?
Through you, Mayor, Council, any member of Council has the option of requesting the vote be split. So technically, you could ask that Council votes first on receiving the information and then second on option 2, which you've just voted on for the amendment. You could do that if you wanted to.
Okay, everyone's satisfied with what we're voting on? Very good. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries 4-2. We will now move on to report 11.2, and this is that Council received report CAO 2024-03, Prime Minister's Path Options for Next Steps, and further, that Council directs staff to proceed with option 1 as presented in report CAO 2024-03. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. I will now turn it over to CAO Chambers.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide options to Council on next steps as it relates to the Prime Minister's Path statutes, as per the motion that was adopted by Council on January 15th. And that motion directed staff to prepare options on ways to proceed with a permanent plan for the Prime Minister's Path statutes, including information related to a potential referendum for Council's consideration at the February 26th regular Council meeting. The report goes into some extensive background on the Prime Minister's Path project, but I won't get into detail on that. I will just sort of pick it up in July of 2020 when Wilmot Council voted to undertake an engagement process on the Prime Minister's Path, and First Peoples Group was retained to design and lead the engagement strategy. And by the fall, Council had voted to remove the Sir John A. Macdonald statue and place it into storage. In 2021, First Peoples Group compiled a report following the public consultation process, and they developed 3 recommendations for the community. The first recommendation was to remove the existing statutes related to the Prime Minister's Path and discontinue any future expansion or investment in the Prime Minister's Path as it existed at that time. The second recommendation was to create a working group comprised of a balanced representation of individuals and communities within Wilmot Township to discuss, develop, and suggest plans for the implementation of next steps centered in community cohesion and healing. And the third step is to commit to transforming community engagement and consultation processes in Wilmot Township in a way that encourages greater openness, accountability, and citizen participation in decision-making. So the motion also requested that staff report back on the actions taken since the Prime Minister's Path statutes were removed in 2021. In September of 2020, as I indicated, the Sir John A. Macdonald statue was placed in secure storage, and the cost of this storage is $661 approximately a month, and we've spent about $23,252 between 2020 and January of 2024, and the statues remain in storage pending the direction of Council. We've also, in 2021, applied for a multiculturalism grant, and that was under the Community Support Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism Initiatives Fund, and we obtained $45,000 for consultation to be take us forward into the next steps on the consultation on this project. We had a pause in 2022 with the municipal election and staff shortages that we've already discussed tonight that persisted throughout 2023. And so we took a pause on moving forward on the engagement. In terms of engagement process, we discussed that a little bit tonight, that we, in support of the third recommendation of First Peoples Group, we have taken steps to improve our engagement processes with the community. In September of 2023, Council received the draft communications strategy, which identified some communication and engagement activities that will be taking place in the coming year, including developing the Engage Waterloo Region platform, to be able to start utilizing that platform for community engagement. We've hired the Manager of Communications and Strategic Initiatives position, who has experience in community engagement. And in 2024, we'll also be developing our strategic plan with Council, and that will also do some community engagement. In terms of options on next steps for the Prime Minister's Path, this report does provide 3 options for council's consideration. The first is to maintain the current direction and create a working group of individuals and communities in Wilmot following the completion of the strategic plan development. The second option is to engage further on the Prime Minister's Path project to assess community support for establishing the working group and to, or possibly explore alternative approaches for citizen engagement and decision-making. And the third, as was directed by the motion passed by Council, to explore the possibility of conducting a referendum on the future of the Prime Minister's Path, for sharing information with the community about the intention and history of the Prime Minister's Path. This option would require a reconsideration, which is a 2/3 yes vote of 6 council members to reopen the 2021 direction of council. So I'll go into those options in detail for council now. The first one, to maintain the current direction and create a working group comprised of a balanced representation of the individuals and communities within Wilmot. And you'll note that this is the recommendation that we would proceed with this option. And the reason that staff is recommending that we proceed with this option is that this is the option that was arrived at through community engagement. So what we heard through the consultation process with First Peoples Group is that they wanted to see better engagement with the community and better citizen input into decision making. So we would recommend that if council were to want to change directions, that they would do so only through additional engagement with the community. So that's why we've recommended this, because the community arrived at this, with the First Peoples Group through, extensive consultation. To move forward with this work, we could use the CASMA funding is what we call it. And we would engage a firm that specializes in creating inclusive engagement plans for diverse communities. And some of the activities that this firm could take the lead on in shaping the work and providing guidance would be actually assisting with the creation of the working group. This firm can offer insights on how to establish an effective working group. There are some examples and case studies that could be examined, and so we could receive some advice from this group on how to create that group, the structure, the composition, best practices, and that sort of thing. They could also assist in developing the terms of reference and mandate. They could also assist with developing a selection process for the committee or the working group based on best practices to ensure a diverse representation. And they could also provide advice to the working group and support the working group through its operation. For project timing, I'm recommending that the work be staged in conjunction with the township's strategic planning process as follows. We do have council approval to proceed with the strategic planning process using a third-party consultant, and that really would develop the vision and goals for the community and would be based on robust community engagement. The reason I'm recommending this staging is through my experience with, I would say, projects that are similar in nature in terms of being a local decision-making point, but being of national significance. I do have experience working with the nuclear industry, and those are certainly polarizing issues of national significance. And I've worked with some of the who I would consider being some of the best professionals across the country in terms of building consensus on these types of national and polarizing issues. And it's a very slow and collaborative process. So in those cases, what we did was we started with building a vision for the community that did not consider the project. It really looked at working with the community, identifying what are the goals of the community, what is the vision of the community, what is important to the community, and then once that is complete, then you consider the project and how that aligns with the goals and vision that you've identified within the community. And I've found that has been a successful approach. So That work would begin in March if council approves this as the direction, and continue through August. Simultaneously, because we do have to use the Kasmari funding by June, I would suggest that we begin in April to engage the firm who would develop that inclusive engagement and to make recommendations about how we would create that working group, develop the terms of reference and mandate. And then when that work is done, we would look towards more the fall to establish the working group. That also assists in sort of staging the projects so that we have sufficient resources to be, engaging both in our strategic plan and also this large project that will involve significant community engagement. And as you know, we've just discussed that we do have limited resources within the office of the CAO, and so that would assist us in being able to appropriately stage that work and lead those projects sort of one at a time. Option number 2 is to engage further on the Prime Minister's PATH project to assess community support for establishing the working group or explore alternative approaches. And this is something that I put forward as an option for council because I have heard from you since you've taken office that you've gotten feedback from the community that they felt the engagement process was not sufficient, that perhaps their views were not seen within the First Peoples Group report. And as I had suggested earlier, if council wishes to change direction, that I strongly recommend that it be done through engagement with the community to develop an approach. We did speak with First Peoples Group just to get their feedback on what they saw through the consultation process, and they indicated that they were actually given sort of a shortened time frame from the council at that time, shorter than what they would typically see in an engagement that they've done in other communities. And they also indicated that COVID had really hampered their ability to engage because it was very much virtual engagement. It wasn't those more in-person forums where you could work to build more consensus and have those conversations. So, that is another option. And if council selects that alternative, we could use the Kasmari funding to hire a firm to lead that work and report back on findings and develop further recommendations for next steps. And for option number 3, as directed by council, to conduct a referendum, a question on the ballot, I would refer that over to our resident expert, Clerk Bunn, to outline that section of the report.
Thank you, CAO Chambers, and through you, Mayor. In the report, you'll see quite a lot of detail with respect to the referendum. I try to provide as much of the information relating to the legislation as I could that helps support CAO Chambers' report. I'll just highlight a few points for council, just to make you aware of certain sections that may be of interest to you. So with respect to a referendum as an option, Section 8.1B of the Municipal Act gives council the power to submit to its electors a question on the ballot. As noted in the staff report, a referendum would run similar to a municipal election, including the use of a voters list, voter notification, vote technology, and polling stations. Only those who are eligible electors would be able to participate. So this means that only those who reside in the municipality or is an owner of, or a tenant of land here or a spouse of such owner or tenant, they must be a Canadian citizen, at least 18 years old, and not prohibited from voting under subsection 3 of the Act or otherwise by bylaw. With respect to the cost, the report highlights 2 options. Option A, which would see a referendum held in October 2024, and option B, at another date selected by council. This is about a $46,000 difference between the 2 options. And this is primarily because if council chose to go with option A, holding a referendum in October 2024, the vote technology vendor, who we have contracted out for 2022 and during the municipal election, has advised that they'd be able to leverage the mobilization of their resources that they're already doing for the 2024 Nova Scotia municipal elections that are taking place. With that said, if council chose to go outside of that time frame, which you would have the possibility to do, they'd be looking for at least a 3-month period to advise them of that decision, as well as an increase in costs that you've seen in the report. So with that said, there is an existing $71,000 in capital that could be used towards offsetting the cost of a referendum, which would mean that option A would require approximately $45,900 from the tax levy, or option B at $92,000. I'm happy to take any questions and pass them maybe back to CAO Chambers.
Yes, so I think the remaining piece is to discuss the financial impact of the options. And I'll go through the option 1 and option 2, which we would anticipate those would be similar costs, and they would range from approximately $45,000 to $60,000. And there is existing funding available. The total funding available at this time is $116,000, and that includes the Canada Heritage Multiculturalism Program grant of $45,000. And then the referendum being in the range of $116,000 to $163,000. So with that, I will open it up for discussion to Council.
Thank you very much. Council, I will ask if any of you have a technical or a question of technical nature to CAO Chambers at this time. If you don't, then we will go to our delegates and then we will have our debate post the delegations. Yes, Councillor Cressman.
Just from a technical point of view, I was looking at option 1, and the second paragraph talks about further, this option advances the work done by First Peoples Group on behalf of the township using a collaborative approach to help determine a path forward for the Prime Minister's path. So that isn't, there's no presupposition about what's happening with the Prime Minister's path. It's a collaborative approach. All things are on the table, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. This report speaks to process only and does not address what will happen with the statutes. I think that is the work that is remaining for the working group or whatever path council decides going forward.
And one further question through you, Mayor. On option 2, again, the difference I can detect in the approach is that we zoom out a little bit, and the difference is it isn't a given that there'll be a working group. It's a given that we will be engaging someone to lead the process, but the working group that First Peoples recommended isn't necessarily a given in option 2.
Correct, and I think if council selected that option, we would sort of have to hone in and develop what the terms of reference may look like for the consultant that you would wish to engage. We could seek public feedback on the recommendation that was put forward within the First Peoples Group to see if there's support. And I know that members of council have discussed, other types of engagement that they would like to see through this process. And so that's something that could also be explored, since the initial engagement was virtual and didn't offer a lot of in-person engagement. There could be other opportunities for engagement that would be explored through that option. That being said, there could be other opportunities for engagement that would be explored through the working group as well. So the working group could be tasked with developing types of engagement that would be appropriate for the community.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, just reviewing the funding options here and noted under the Heritage Multiculturalism Grant, is that tied to remaining or keeping First Peoples Group as the consulting firm, or is there flexibility on that?
Through you, Mayor, I believe the funding application did speak to First Peoples Group, but really the funding criteria is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it would, I worded it more in terms of being a firm that would be able to engage with that lens. So I would anticipate there would be either an RFP that would be issued, and we would accept proposals for the work once we develop those terms of reference.
Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. For the referendum, the two separate costs, you had mentioned, CAO, that there was approximately, I think, 116,000 in the budget for this. Is that correct? Yes?
Through you, Mayor, there's 116,000 of available funds, and that includes the 45,000, which has to be used for the diversity, equity, and inclusion component.
Right, okay, so I'm just double checking here. I just want to make sure I have all my information correct. So let's say for option A, for cost for option A, then there wouldn't be much more to spend. Is that correct? 116,000 versus 117,000? Am I understanding that correctly?
Through you, Mayor. So the 45,000 would, go towards the consultant. There would be $71,000 remaining that could support next steps. So those funds could be available for the working group if that's what council chose, or other types of engagement. Those are the remaining funds available for the project, keeping in mind that the storage costs are reducing that by $661 each month.
Every month, great. Thank you so much.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I do want to get to the delegations, but with regards to the storage, and if this doesn't fall under technical, but I believe it would, are there options where we could store them using our own facilities and save that cost altogether?
That is not something we've explored at this point. I think, the intent at the time was to have a confidential location for those statues. But if council so directs, we could explore alternative storage options.
All right. I believe all the technical questions have been answered, so now we will move on to delegations. I do just want to reiterate that we have 3 registered delegations for this item. Everyone will be given 7 minutes to speak. I also want to reiterate that the report before us is about process, not about final decisions. So I would ask that your presentation be related to the report and about process, not about final decisions on what happens to the statues. With that being said, I will now call up our first delegation, and that is Andrew Kipp. And Andrew, thank you for joining us today. And yes, well, thank you. You will have 7 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you very much to council and members of the corporation for letting me speak tonight. In the interest of keeping my point as close to the process as possible, I'm trying to scale down a fairly large subject into a fairly narrow time margin. One of the things that I've seen come up frequently in discussions over the Prime Minister's Path project is that it serves an educational purpose. And I wanted to largely speak to why that is not the case, so much to speak. Now, this, of course, is a conversation that is probably going to need to happen later on after process has been decided. So I'm only going to speak to this briefly, just to put some thoughts into your heads for you to consider when you're deciding whether or not to move forward with consultations or otherwise. The argument that the Prime Minister's Path project is educational is based on the idea that people will go into a public space, encounter these statues, and decide to research these statues' historical significance on their own independently. Generally speaking, most statues we see in public spaces, this is not the case. Statues serve as a monument sort of idea. They serve to reinforce an idea and to reinforce an ideology. And whether this is for things we agree with or disagree with is beside the point. My point here is that these statues, if we wish to include them in our public spaces and we wish to use the idea that they serve an educational purpose, they need to have educational resources to go along with them to explain the context and the great ideas behind them. As it presently stands, based on what we have seen for the proposal for the Prime Minister's Path project, I believe it is inadequate to meeting that need. If the desire is to go forward and continue in the process of making the statues publicly accessible for the public to make use of and enjoy, these need to be considered in an environment that is more conducive to education on who these figures are and what purpose they've served in our country. Speaking as a history major at university, history is incredibly important to me and something I'm very passionate about. I believe that it is important for people to understand who these people were in our past, what decisions they made, why, and how they came about making these decisions, and what it means for a greater current social context. That being said, to do so adequately, I think the scope of the project needs to be expanded upon. Instead of just statues being in a public space, which, don't get me wrong, bronze statues in a public space look gorgeous. I'm a big fan of bronze statues. But I feel it doesn't do necessarily anything to enrich and build a sense of community in Wilmot Township. Wilmot Township has a lot of history that, if we are trying to celebrate Wilmot Township's history, something more conducive to a local identity is more important. There are, of course, any number of things we could discuss. I'm not going to go into them because, again, that's a little outside of our scope of tonight's meeting. Ask me later if you're really curious. I have ideas. That being said, as things stand, if we want to go forward with the Path of Prime Minister's project and we wish to keep the bronze statues, I believe doing it more as a display or as a museum exhibit would be more conducive to an educational experience that would be beneficial for the general public and for local educators. This would, of course, require a greatly increased scope of costs, which I am not an expert on because, again, I barely understand money as it is. One of the many things they don't teach you in high school is budgeting, surprisingly. But that being said, if we do want to move forward with this project, we need to consider how better to use these in an educational scope. We need to consider how to inform the general public and general populace what these statues mean for our collective identity and how to go about. The sentence is gone, so I'm going to move on to the next sentence. Generally speaking, and because I actually went through my points a little bit faster than I expected, I believe that if we are going to use these as an educational tool, we need to use them in a proper educational tool. There are many ways to go about that, but most of the points on how to go about that will come after the process is considered. If the process is our primary focus tonight, if the goal is, of course, to discuss with the larger populace over the purpose of these statues and whether to go ahead with the project as it stands, I agree. Education of our former prime ministers is important. Understanding these things are important. And if we are to engage with the greater community over what this means, we need to look over how this is going to be publicly done in a way that is both sustainable, cost-effective for the township, as well as enriching to the community. I yield the rest of my time, I think, in official speak, but thank you so much for listening to me speak. And if you have any questions, I make myself at the council and the general populace's disposal for answers.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for your presentation and your perspective. Councillor Wilkinson, I believe, has a question.
Through the chair, Andrew, thank you for coming in and sharing your perspective. I think it definitely, to your point, will be some great points to be made after the process is determined, but I appreciate your perspective. I am curious, though, just in general, do you reside in Township of Wilmot?
Yes, so
Excellent.
I attend school in Waterloo at Wilfrid Laurier University, but I have been a resident in Wilmot Township, but I live right on the border between Wilmot and Wellesley. I actually live right inside Wilmot's tax code. So I am a Wilmot Township resident, although when people ask where I live, I typically say Wellesley because it's literally just beyond my backyard. So yes, I am a local resident.
I'll share. I have some good conversations with folks out in Lisbon, Gerber Road area, and they are split as to, I don't know who to identify with,
Yeah.
but I appreciate your perspective and time tonight, and if you do stick around after, we'd love to chat.
Absolutely.
Councillor Cressman.
Very interested in your presentation. Many things in it that resonate with me, and thinking if you come up with a short list of museums that would take them and do the educational piece at the same time, that's something you can put your thinking cap on.
I would, based on what little I know presently, I haven't looked into that in too much detail because that's a little beyond the scope of what I intended to do tonight. But as I understand it, there's nothing in our region that is specifically suited for that. I don't think that means that there aren't options to explore, as for a very out there idea. We are in Castle Kilbride. Castle Kilbride represents a period of history, but inside the larger building itself, there are museum exhibits towards other aspects of our local history. So I don't think we need to open an entirely new museum exhibit entirely, but again, I don't think there's anything specifically in the scope of what we're looking at. I know I've seen online conversation over the fact that this is trying to bring a more local resource for this sort of national education outside of the city of Ottawa, which, speaking as someone who hates driving on the 401, I love that. But at the same time, it's a complicated matter, and it is, of course, an expensive matter, as has been brought up in the town hall meeting tonight so far. Budgets are tight, and it is something that is difficult to do to an idealized extent, but also to something that would be beneficial to shareholders by and large.
Very good. Any, Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you to you, Mayor. I concur with my colleagues. Mr. Kipp, I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation and especially was interested in the education portion, which is something that I've always been concerned about. And I like what you said, so I just wanted to tell you I appreciated it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this time, councillors? Seeing none, thank you again, Andrew, for joining us, and I'm sure we'll see you back after the process is established. Oh, yes. Very good. I would like to invite our next delegation, and that is Mary Pavey and Dorothy Wilson from the Wilmot Ecumenical Working Group on Indigenous Settler Relationships to address council. And thank you, Marie and Dorothy, for joining, and you ladies will have 7 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Salonen, Wilmot councillors and staff, members of the public. My name is Dorothy Wilson, and I'm a member of the Wilmot Ecumenical Working Group on Indigenous Settler Relationships. Our group was established in 2017 to respond to the TRC's 94 calls to action and its specific calls to the churches. All interested churches and individuals, regardless of their affiliation with the faith community, are welcome to be part of this endeavor. We aim to promote understanding of the history of Indigenous communities in this area and beyond, create space for and facilitate relationship building between Indigenous and settler people, and raise awareness of settler privilege. Over the years, we have hosted numerous events that have attracted between 40 and 80 people, and just last week at the Wilmot Heritage Day, we were pleased with the attention that our exhibit received. These experiences have shown us that our community is interested in learning more about Indigenous history and culture and how relationships with Indigenous people can be enhanced. We also know from our involvement in this work that there are many who feel they do not have a voice in what goes on in our community. In particular, many Indigenous people prefer to remain invisible and silent because of past and ongoing trauma caused by colonial structures. We are pleased that the township has also responded to the TRC's calls to action. One example is the township program that took place in September of last year to commemorate the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. More recently, a Canada Day task force has been established and is considering how best to involve Indigenous members of our community in the programming for the day through building and maintaining relationships. Because of what we have come to learn about our community, we strongly support the recommendation made by the staff in their recent report, quote, maintain current direction and create a working group comprised of a balanced representation of the individuals and communities within Wilmot Township, unquote. This direction incorporates what the First Peoples Group included in their report as the appropriate response to dealing with the Prime Minister's Path issue, a report that was endorsed unanimously by the previous council. At this point, I would like to turn things over to Marie Pavey, our group's co-chair, for some personal reflections.
Thanks, Dorothy. I have now spent 32 years as a Baden resident. I grew up in a farming community south of London, Ontario. My ancestors are mostly British, arriving in Canada in the 1800s. My journey of deeper understanding of issues facing First Peoples began in 1976 when I was in grade 4. At that time, a few students joined our class from 3 nearby communities of Oneida Nation of the Thames, Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, and Munsee Delaware Nation. Later in grades 7 and 8, the Indigenous students constituted about half of each of the classes. Their authenticity drew me into friendships with many of the Indigenous students. I listened to my classmates and what they, their families, and their communities had lost, what had been taken from them by my people, their land, their culture, and their languages. But I also deeply felt what they had retained: wisdom, knowledge, resilience, humor, and humility. I have come to realize that one of the greatest gifts these relationships gave to me was to understand that my experience was not the same experience as others around me had. I learned that although my life had challenges, the playing field was not level. My friends had many hurdles to jump over that simply didn't exist for me. I learned that when Indigenous people raise concerns, I should listen to those concerns and value their insights that I might not see. In the Wilmot Healing Circle led by Elder Nina Deshane, it is my honor and privilege to continue to learn by listening to stories, to laugh, and to cry with people of all nations, with others from all nations. Being part of Circle has allowed me to become a much better listener, and I am continuing to learn. The issue of how to proceed with the Prime Minister's path is a complex one in which there are differing opinions, in which listening will be important. Councillor Wilkinson's motion asks staff to report on the possibilities of a referendum in the matter. A referendum, by its nature, pits one side against another. I fear there will be a lot of noise and talk, but not a lot of true listening. The outcomes may appear clear on paper, but how many stories will be told? How many will be silenced? How much learning will happen? I have come to understand that the issue of the Prime Minister's path is not about what solutions I may have, but it is about holding space for those whose ancestors cared for this land. Truth and reconciliation is first about listening for and learning about the truth. Genuine truth and reconciliation is about a conversation, not a campaign. How can we together take a different path that leads to listening and learning? Of course, it would be nice to have the issue of the Prime Minister's path settled quickly, but at what cost? Is this council willing to risk continuing divisions in our community because people have not had the opportunity to listen to others with differing views and work on some mutually agreeable paths forwards? As stated in the staff report, quote, First Peoples Group indicated that the divisiveness and challenges that the township faced with extreme polarization runs much deeper than the Prime Minister's Path project alone, and that discontinuing any further commitment to the project would not erase the fear, harm, hate, and division in the community. They advise that working to restore relationships and community cohesion will not only take dedicated effort, but it will also take time. I would like to reinforce that the Wilmot Ecumenical Working Group on Indigenous Settler Relationships fully supports both the recommendations of the First Peoples Group report and the Wilmot staff report, option number 1. Such a group could engage all stakeholders, allow diverse representation, allow for consensus building, and promote unity. In short, such a process would engage our community in a more meaningful process than a referendum. Let us see where such an approach might lead us. Such issues take time to be settled, and we are aware that the storage costs are concerning, but what will be the financial and social costs of not listening to those with different opinions and histories as ourselves? Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much, ladies, for joining us and for your presentation. Councillors, any questions at this time? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, no questions. Again, thank you for your perspective. I appreciate it. And maybe just to clarify as well, so you understand, the referendum is certainly something off the top of my head that seemed appealing, but I am inclined to agree with some of your observations, and I think there's potentially a moment of reflection where it's Is this something that needs to happen immediately? Maybe not. Maybe it comes out of a working group. I don't know. I think there's process to be discussed. But ultimately, one of the other pieces I was looking to achieve by asking for the information on it is that it's simply presented as an option, so we know. I think seeing the actual costs associated with it was something I didn't necessarily expect either. So appreciate your perspective. I appreciate you taking the time to share your side of your thoughts on the process, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you again, Maria and Dorothy, for joining us this evening. And again, I'm sure we will see you as this process continues. On to our next and final delegation for this topic this evening, and that would be Glenn Mathers. Is Glenn joining us online? Okay, Glenn is joining us virtually, so we will just give him time to get logged in and make sure your sound works. This might be a coffee break for those viewing as we're waiting for him to join.
How's the weather in Florida, Lillian?
Warm.
All right, Glenn, are you online with us now?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us. I just want to confirm you don't have a camera set up that you're trying to have a view on?
I did, but it dropped off, so.
Okay, that's fine. We're perfectly fine with just audio.
Perfect.
So thank you again for joining us, Glenn, and you will have 7 minutes to speak.
I'll be less than that. So at a previous council meeting, I mentioned that Createscape is willing to support the project as it did in the past. And I wish to reiterate that on behalf of that charity. They would like to see this historic project continue. If this continues, it'll be the only place in Canada, where the statues of all prime ministers will be located in one spot. Not to be worshipped, not to be looked at, but to demarcate the time periods for each leader and educational information. And this is something that was missed with our last council group that was never talked about. Educational information about each time period would be provided, the good, the bad, and the ugly from each time period. Somebody talked earlier about that, and I think they didn't realize that that was something that was going to take place going forward.
Glenn, I just want to make sure your audio, I'm not certain if it dropped off.
I can hear you.
Okay. So was that your whole delegation? I just want to make sure that we didn't miss any part there.
So, did you hear everything? Oh, you want me to say it again?
No, we heard everything up to the point of you just saying that you didn't think the educational component was necessarily heard. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't missing anything beyond that of your delegation, but we got the reiteration of Createscape willing to support. And
I'll just add one more point.
Yep.
The cost of doing a referendum, each statue costs roughly $100,000, give or take. The cost of a referendum is just about the same cost of one statue. We're talking about 22 statues that the Createscape is prepared to fund.
Okay, thank you very much. Glenn, anything else that you'd like to add? Because like you said, you were going to be done quick, but I just want to make sure when you still have your 4.5 minutes.
I'm done.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Glenn. Councillors, any questions or comments for Glenn at this time? Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you. Through you. Glenn, thank you for your delegation. And I just wanted to make sure I understood you, that any additional statues would be at no cost to the constituents. Is that correct? Glenn?
I'm sorry, you froze on my computer. You said.
Oh, sorry.
My
My question to you was that that any additional statues will be at no cost to the taxpayers. Is that correct?
So Createscape is prepared to fund not just the current 22 prime ministers, but go on beyond that to the future.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, just again, thank you for your perspective. More so the information coming from Createscape.
Very good. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Seeing none, thank you again, Glenn, for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you throughout the process as well. I'm sure you'll participate. And councillors, so that concludes our delegations. So now we can discuss and debate. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Councillor Cressman.
I appreciated what CAO Chambers had to say about her past history of on nuclear, well, I guess nuclear, well, whatever the proper terminology, nuclear waste or whether this has been next to something that would explode in our midst here. And I think that's the piece that maybe time has given us a little bit of perspective on this. I really like that idea that you talked about of really trying to sit down in the process and determine what your community and your municipality should look like. What do you aspire to be? And what is it that we want Wilmot to be known for? And I think that's the piece that really each of us has to think and bring to the table in this. And I think I'm not going to point fingers at those who went before and thought this was a great opportunity or what it might mean. I think there was some unintended consequences that came along, and if nothing else, as a new councillor and during the process leading up, I've learned a lot of things about prime ministers that I was never taught in school. And I'm a amateur historian. I didn't take history, I took science, but I always said I wished I would have audited a couple courses in history at university, because it really gives us an idea of why we are where we are today and the background of our current existence. And I'm sure there's future generations that will look at us and wonder why we thought the way we thought and did what we did with our resources or an environment, et cetera, et cetera. So where am I headed with this? I think both the first two options give us the opportunity to take a step back and make sure, kind of zoom out and go to a higher level and try to figure out, what do we aspire our township to be? A township that welcomes people of all races and backgrounds, and say and indicate that you are a valued member of our township and our community. And that's, I think, what I have as a personal aspiration for this township. I think one of the things that I talked about when I was campaigning, because it's easier to say things when you're campaigning rather than when you're into the thick of it and up to your, well, we won't go where you're up to, but in the issues. But we want to leave the township as a set of councillors and as a council in a better place than when we received it. And I've always said that was my approach to my farm, as I leave it for the next generation, that it's in a better place than I received it from my father and that his father received it from his grandfather. So all to say, I think if we can step back from this and look at what do we aspire for our township, where potentially would be the ideal place to give the educational component, and that's further down the road, I acknowledge. But I think that's a great way to start, and I appreciate CAO's Chamber's comments of what she's gone through up in the repository for spent nuclear waste, and that experience will bode well as we work through this for the Township of Wilmot. And that would be my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Cressman. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I always so enjoy listening to Councillor Cressman because I value his knowledge and his experience, and he always gives me other perspectives, which I appreciate. I would not be interested in option one because I do not believe, from my constituents' viewpoints, that everyone was heard. I know that there was a conversation or a comment that it was thorough. I'm not sure that's the case. I've certainly gone through the report and have found many discrepancies. So from my perspective, I certainly think that we need to go back to the community and see what the appetite is like now. But I think that from my perspective, it would be option two.
Thank you, Councillor Dunstall. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, first just want to commend Councillor Cressman on his comments. I think, I mean, did you rehearse that? That was well said, and I echo a lot of what he has to say there. And it's funny to me because when I was sort of looking at this, I think initially my first inclination, as I had mentioned, was can we jump quickly to a referendum and simply poll the folks and come up with what they would like. I mean, it's not that simple, as we've learned, and I think in talking with a lot of interested parties on this piece, I think there is that interest in having the communication and the learning and the opportunity for us to get to know each other better and ultimately come to a decision that will benefit the community as a whole, but representative of the community as a whole. And I think ultimately here it is about stepping back a little bit and determining who do we want to be, what do we want to represent, and I think ultimately it's about looking at the scope of this project and whether or not it's something our community desires at all. I want to sort of remove some of the political pieces to it and ultimately look at what it entails or what it is meant to serve. So I'm inclined to sort of look at option one or two. I think at this time, if it potentially leads to a referendum down the road, at least we have some information indicating what that could look like and how it may need to be structured, in addition to what the cost could be. I think the important piece for me and something that I want to sort of put out there as a part of our discussion is needing to likely remove the First Peoples group from the process. I think upon further exploration of what they set out as their vision and what they intend to achieve, I'm not sure it would be beneficial to this process. I think their initial work is something that we can look at, use, and some of the items that they've outlaid here are useful, but ultimately I think they need to be removed, and that bias and that piece needs to be removed so that we can have a made in Wilmot solution. So what that looks like, I don't know. I think we should have this conversation. And also another piece that comes to mind for me is potentially a further conversation on what the storage costs are and how can we mitigate that or essentially end that immediately. Do we have facilities that could accommodate it and also sort of still maintain the confidentiality piece? That would be my goal here as well. So can we save the money, find a way to come together as a group and have an educational conversation and a constructive conversation? And I think that could be achieved through option 1 or 2, but open to hearing more.
Councillor Sadhu.
Yeah, so the more I thought about it and I looked at it, initially I had thought a referendum would be a good option, or an option at least, but in seeing the cost and seeing eventually it would be a very black and white issue of you either for it or against it, I think it'll just go down a road of further dividing the community, which is not my goal, and I'm sure it's not this council's goal to further divide the community. Deciding between option 1 and 2, I am more so leaning towards option 2 with the respect of, I think ultimately a working group is something that could work, a well-balanced working group. If we're going to spend money, I would prefer to spend money on, like, for say, a facilitator or a mediator, and for us council to conduct town halls and open meetings and just kind of get a true sense and a pulse of what the community is thinking and saying right now. I mean, a lot has changed since COVID. We have a lot more new citizens in this township. I mean, I think back to 20 years ago when I was at WO, I was probably one of a handful of visible minorities in high school. And walking into WO now, it's certainly not like that anymore. You see a lot more diversity. And this township is growing. So if we have some sort of working group that incorporates a good, what's the word I'm looking for? Just a good balance of what we have represented in this township. So then it would be a made in Wilmot decision. This is our home. I would love to hear from Wilmot residents. And ultimately, this is something that the residents of the township will be living with. So I want to hear first and foremost from them, possibly through town halls, through further mediation and facilitation. And do I necessarily think we need a firm to help put together a working group? I don't know. This could also be done something through further engagement and to see if it's not something that we can handle or we understand or we get the grasp of, that we can further go down that road later to see if there is a specialized firm that can help with that. Just my thoughts to start. And also I would echo Councillor Wilkinson's thought there of if there is an option to immediately remove the statues from storage, and if there is some sort of spot or something within the township that we do not have to pay the $600 some a month, and it can remain confidential and we can store them safely, I think that would be something that we should definitely explore.
Councillor Martin, I'm just going to call on you as you're the only one who has yet to speak, and then we can continue going around. But if you have any comments now, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Salonen. I appreciate that, although I'm aware I don't think you've spoken as well. Happy to talk. I want to say that I appreciate CAO Chambers' comments. And I thought your statement about how this decision, as your experience elsewhere, it's a local decision that has national significance, and I think that's accurate. So I appreciate the comments that the other councillors have made. I think that there is something about Made in Wilmot. At the same time, I'm recognizing that this really does affect people beyond Wilmot, in our province and in our country. I do personally, I would be in favor of option one. I think that's a good way to go. I vacillate back and forth between hiring a firm or starting with a working group here in the township and then moving forward. I realize that the funding is here, and I think it would be good if we would take advantage of that, because I realize there's a time limit on the funding, and an outside firm could be very helpful. I think the First Peoples Group have come up with some good recommendations, one of them being the working group, which is why I think that would be a good step forward. So if we were making a decision tonight, I'd certainly be in favor of option one.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. That is a fair point. I didn't realize that I'm included in council and had to speak still, because I do have comments on this. I would say my concerns with option one is because it is the work still coming out of the First Peoples Group. There are a huge number of people that sit on all different spectrums on this issue that were not pleased with the work the First Peoples Group did. And so I wouldn't want to invalidate the process by people making the assumption, if we're going ahead with their plan, that it then has a predisposed outcome. Also, I struggle with a working group for a few reasons. One, I would say, to be honest, recruitment for any of our current committees and working groups is difficult. We are often scraping by with just a few over the threshold of what terms of reference require. And I think that this is a really important question that I would really hate to see either a special interest group be disproportionately represented, or people who want to engage in the topic but feel that the potential commitment to a working group might not be something that they could commit to at this time. I don't want to be excluding them from the conversation. I also think that this conversation has grown a lot bigger than what it initially was. With the Kamloops discovery and the red paint being thrown on Sir John A. Macdonald, that certainly opened up an avenue and brought a perspective that I would say many of us, at least certainly speaking for myself, were not aware of, or not to the extent by any means. However, having talked with people both in Wilmot and further afar, it's been brought to my attention that Indigenous relations are not the only issue and concerns with our past prime ministers, and I mean that will be true of our future prime ministers. An example that I still find very fascinating that someone brought up to me was about William Lloyd Mackenzie King, and this was from someone who happens to be Jewish, and they said that he and his government at the time were responsible for not a single Jewish refugee being let into Canada, even though we knew prior to World War II the persecution that they were experiencing in Europe. And then I later learned last week, AMO did a course on anti-Semitism, which I took, and they further spoke about that and how we actually turned away an entire ship of Jewish refugees. The government at the time chose to do that, and they wound up having to go back to Europe, and many of those people were persecuted. Those are just two examples, the Indigenous and the Jewish people at a different time period. And I think that it really shows that this is a far bigger scope and question that we're dealing with. That I think if we want to deal with this appropriately and really take an informed decision as a community, I think there needs to be opportunity for that dialogue and learning and understanding of what we're actually talking about when we're putting up these statues. And if they do get put up, if there's an educational component, or if we sell them somewhere, do we have an inherent responsibility on who is purchasing them and where they're going? And I think if we go straight to a working group, that there's still going to be the reflection of where the statues were left 2 years ago when this issue was addressed, versus taking that larger scope perspective that I think is important. So I'd be leaning towards a modified option 2. And I say modified in that when looking at hiring a firm specializing in inclusive engagement, I do also think about the fact that, you know, kind of the concept of a Maiden Wilmot approach. I do think that we have the capability to hold town halls, and I would rather look at, instead of hiring a firm, because firms also come with their own biases and own objectives. And this is an issue I would say has not really been dealt with effectively anywhere nationally, or even further abroad. When I was at Oxford, it was the Roads Must Fall campaign was going to facilitate community discussions that I think we can put parameters around to ensure that we create a safe space for people to share and connect. Councillor Dunstall, I did see your hand up there.
I just wanted to say that I would support that 100%.
Very good. Councillor Cressman?
Through you, Mayor, I would like to ask the CEO, in terms of the nuclear waste in Bruce County, correct? How did that process work, just so I have a little clearer picture? I knew it was contentious, reading about it in the Ontario Farmer, but I didn't understand the process.
Yes, and I was there just through the beginning of the process. So in South Bruce, who was considering the high-level nuclear waste repository, and then subsequently in Kincardine for the low and intermediate level deep geologic repository. So there were 2 separate processes, but I'll refer to the one in South Bruce because it really was, a multi-year community engagement initiative that really started with the visioning exercise for the community, and then it really was about education for the community with the goal of determining, not only for South Bruce but other communities that were involved in the process for accepting this project, whether there was an informed and willing host community. And so it was really looked at in terms of a slow process, bringing information to the community, gathering feedback. I suspect it's been ongoing for 7 years or more, and we'll be reaching a decision point this year. So that's the type of process that was involved, starting with that visioning, what is important to the community, not looking at this project at all when doing the visioning for the community, looking more at who do we want to be. You were very articulate in how you expressed that. Who do we want to be as a community? What is important to us? And then separately, let's look at this project and determine if it fits with that.
Just as a follow-up through you, Mayor, was that led by a facilitator or a firm, or just so I get a sense?
In that case, because it was a federally regulated project, it was led by the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which was actually a federally legislated organization that was created to implement this project.
That being said, I think we have a bit of a roadmap here that provides us that initial phase about visioning from our township. It will also inform, certainly there will be elements of it that will inform our strategic plan and what we can implement. I was always interested at how did this recommendation, with every recommendation we received as a new council, fit these 2 phrases at the end of the recommendation, and I thought, well, where did they come from? What was the impetus to include them? Is this just window dressing, or do they have real significant meaning as we try to say, is it drawing the circle around the bullseye or the dart, throwing a dart and then drawing the circle around it, or is it in fact reinforcing that this is where we where we want to be. So anyhow, very interested in this process as it moves forward.
Very good, and I've just learned a new way to play darts. I'll get very better instantly. Okay, so Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, so if we were moving in the direction of option 2, what is it that we're leaving out from option 1? Like, I understand both of them have a working group. So if we went ahead with option 2, it would be a working group. And I don't know, Mayor Salonen, if you were going to add an amendment to option 2. I'm just trying to figure out what the difference is between the two of them. I'm happy to collaborate with all of you on council here to see what we can do to work together. I'm just trying to understand what is it that you don't want to do from option 1 that would be different in option 2.
CAO Chambers actually wanted to add a comment to that first.
Yes, and I think at this point, perhaps I'd invite Clerk Bunn to comment procedurally. Option 1 is really just moving forward with the First Peoples Group recommendation, which is to create the working group and to use the Kasmari funding to assist with developing terms of reference and really creating that working group. Option 2, I think would require a bit more detail for council coming back to really dig into what it could look like. And so, you know, we've been just conferring a little bit procedurally on what would be required if council does not move forward with option 1. And it may be best to come back with a report to really hone in a little bit more on what option 2 looks like. So that council could make an informed decision between option 1 and option 2. So would you mind speaking procedurally on what would be required if council chooses not to proceed with the recommendation of staff?
Absolutely. Through you, Mayor, there's a few steps that council would have to take procedurally. As you're aware, on, I'm just looking for the date here, July 5th, 2021, the Council of the Day had passed a resolution creating, or at least, passed a resolution recommending the creation of a working group and further to making a commitment to transform community engagement. So that is the direction that is currently given to staff to proceed with. That is the direction of the municipality. Council can reconsider that. So that would require a few procedural steps. The first being either it can come through a notice of motion by council and that would be put onto a further council agenda, or council could choose this evening or at a future meeting to waive notice. That would be a vote that would require 2/3 majority. Once you've waived notice requirements, you can then do a vote to reconsider. We've done those before this council, but that would require 2/3 majority, as mentioned in the CAO's presentation at the beginning of this discussion. And then once that's done, you can vote on the new direction. So essentially that vote to reconsider puts you back at the spot where council has received the First Peoples report, and it is really before this council to decide what direction you want to go in, if that's option 2 as outlined by the CAO, or if that's any alternative direction.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, again, we're looking at how we foster engagement, and I find if we jump on this with a motion to reconsider tonight, it almost is counterproductive and speaks against what we're trying to achieve. And so I think coming up with something in writing and allowing people to delegate when they see it in writing, get a better idea of what we're proposing in option 2. I see option 1 as very prescriptive. I see option 2 as saying we may have a working group, but we also can explore other alternatives. And I see that as kind of broadening the horizon in terms of what our options are. So that's why I think option 2 gives us more flexibility and leeway to say if there's a better mousetrap out there, let's find it.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I concur with Councillor Cressman here. I'm sorry, I always stumble over the names, but Councillor Cressman. I think one of the other considerations too is that if we are looking at this, is putting in potentially a firm timeline or a process in place that will roadmap where we will go. And I mean, if we do step back and really look at hosting a community conversation that could be held by a facilitator or another group, how long does that go on? How many times can people show up? We need to probably put some limits on this many meetings at this juncture. We will decide, do we do a working group? Do we do this? Do we do this? Do we do this? And I think that's maybe the one key piece missing from this, because I fear is that you could proceed forward with this option, but then somehow end up at the election in 2026 and not have a resolution. So I would push for, if we do move forward with, say, and what I'm hearing is potentially a move towards getting information back, that it also include potentially in a loose, but some sort of time frame that we can adhere to and stick to, because I don't want to move too quickly, but I also don't want to prolong this any longer than it needs to.
Very good. Our clerk is just figuring out what is the best procedure for us to make all this happen. But is there somebody that will be looking to move, and I don't know yet if it will be an amendment or a motion, but to get a report back from staff? I'm just going off of consensus, so please do not take this as gospel, but you would, Councillor Cressman, would be looking to move getting more information from staff on option number 2, and including a date and time. Councillor Dunstall, that's seconding. Okay. And having the inclusion of, I'm sorry, I am just drawing a blank on what you just said, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I propose a friendly amendment then through the mover and seconder. Thank you. I'm really so yeah, that we would include a potential for timeline in there so that it is well documented how we'd like to proceed forward in terms of timing. That is something that I think is definite and needed.
Okay, so I did get everything inclusive then. Okay, very good. I will just give our clerk a minute or two here to make sure everything's recorded appropriately for their record keeping. And any other comments or questions at this time then, Councillor Wilkinson?
So through the chair, I suppose CAO Chambers would be coming back with this report. What kind of a timeline would you anticipate in terms of needing to come back with this?
So I think we're focusing on the March 4th budget meeting currently and getting the budget passed. I would, let me see, if we could aim for perhaps the second meeting in March. I'm looking towards Ms. Kell, and if we could do that, the second council meeting in March, to report back with a little bit more detail on option 2 and what that might look like.
So that would be March 20th, just to clarify. Sorry, 25th.
Yeah,
I'm getting
through
conflicting
the chair,
dates.
I believe it is the 26th is the second scheduled council meeting in March. So if it was agreed upon by the mover and seconder, could we include that as a friendly amendment as well, that we tie it to getting the report back by that date?
Okay, Monday, March the 25th is...
Yes, I'm looking at February, I'm sorry, today.
Okay.
Today's the 26th.
Very good.
Yes, 25th.
This is the whole clock
March.
scenario all over again.
I got February here, March over here, my apologies.
We're good. I'm going to turn it over to the clerk now to explain the process that we need going forward.
Through you, Mayor. So as Council probably will recall, we do have a mover and a seconder for the main motion, which is on the floor, and that is, let me just get to that one, moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson, that Council receives report CAO 2024-03, Prime Minister Path Options for Next Steps, and further, that council directs staff to proceed with option 1 as presented in the report CAO 2403. What I would look for is an amendment to that main motion, and the amendment itself would read, sorry, let me just begin at the beginning here. Flipping pages. That council receive report CAO 2024-03, Prime Minister's Path, options for next steps, and further that council directs staff to report back to council on March 25th with details relating to the implementation of option number 2 with additional information including a potential timeline for implementation.
Does that work for Councillor Cressman and Councillor Dunstall? You've moved and seconded. Very good. Okay, so that has been moved and seconded. We need to vote on this amendment, and then we will vote on the final motion, whether amended or not. So, any other questions or comments on the amendment, which is to get more information brought back for the 25th of March? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. And now we're voting on the amended motion. So, Councillor Sadhu.
Just procedurally, before we vote on that, I'm going to look at Clerk Bunn here. If I was to bring forward a motion that would have a staff report come back to us with the feasibility of storing the statues off-site or somewhere within our facilities, I don't know if that would be through a public meeting or because the confidential nature it would be in a closed, but.
Through you, Mayor, 2 points on that. The first, I would recommend that be an amendment to this motion that's on the floor right now, because you can tack that on as something that would be, I would consider germane if the chair would. This to the second point, I would agree it would be related to the security of property for the municipality, which is one of the open meeting exemptions. So we would probably report back in closed to council on the feasibility of that.
So are you moving that amendment then, Councillor Stu?
Yeah, I would move that tied in with, I believe, the 25th meeting. We get a report back from staff with the feasibility of removing the statues from storage and storing them in somewhere within township property.
Very good. That's been seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Martin?
I wonder if we could separate those two. I'm all for saving money. At the same time, I'm not sure that I can vote in favor of this motion. I really think that option 1 gives us flexibility. I don't think the People's Group is saying that you have to go in one direction. I think being open to the community, listening to the community is just that, being open to the community and listening to the community. And so I think option 1 gives a lot of flexibility.
We most certainly can separate them. We first need to vote on this amendment to see if it will be added to the motion, and in the case it is, then I'm more than happy to remove those into 2 separate votes. But we will first vote on the amendment. Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. So now we will separate out the motion. We will first vote on the first part of the motion, which is receive for information, and then getting staff to report back on option 2 on March 25th. So we will vote on that part, and then we will do a second vote on the amendment that we just passed. Councillor Wilkinson.
And through the chair here, just to sort of clarify, in essence, we're asking for the further information, but it could be presumed that if this comes back on the 25th, option 1, option 2 could still be considered either or, correct? We haven't, just so everyone's clear, we have not decided on a process. We're simply asking for more.
Yes, that is correct. We're asking for more information specifically on item 2, but come the 25th, we can choose any of those options, or I mean, in theory, if somebody brought forward something else, that could be considered as well. Councillor Martin.
Then just to clarify, I'm all for information, so it's fine with me to gather more information. I thought by voting in favor, we would be precluding option 1, but you're saying that's not accurate.
That's not my interpretation. Okay, that's not the interpretation of anyone here, so it is just seeking more information, but it does not mean that we're bound on the 25th to go forward with that plan. Okay, so in that case, then we won't separate the vote. We will just do the motion as amended with both amendments. Any other questions or comments then at this time? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. All right, and I'm sure we will see many of you in the audience as well as viewing online back on the 25th as we continue the discussion of the process. On to our final kind of main topic for the evening, which is our notice of motion coming from Councillor Martin. Councillor Martin, I will turn it over to you.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, have to think about what I'm doing, just to change gears. So I guess I would read this motion, correct?
Yep, you're welcome to read it or just summarize. It's
okay. Well,
up to you, as I believe council, we all had this in advance. So.
Perfect. So if you don't need me to read the whole motion, essentially, at the Heritage Committee, we put forward this motion. As you know, I'm on the Heritage Committee, and I believe we have a delegation here tonight on this topic. So essentially, it's being concerned about heritage buildings. The province has put in a new rule that takes away the length of time that we have in terms of designated heritage building. Our worry is that if we're stuck within a very short timeline, we could lose some of our heritage buildings. It's true that there may not be absolute protection with a heritage designation, but at least it gives time that if somebody was trying to demolish a building that has heritage status or has heritage significance, then we have more time to consider it, and we're not going to quickly get rid of historical buildings. So that's the intent of the motion, and it's bringing forward the concern from the Heritage Committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And I will now call on our delegation for this evening on this topic, and that is Marge Rowell. Marge, are you in person? Yes, wonderful. Thank you for joining us, Marge, and for sticking along this late. I know this is a later than normal council meeting, but we appreciate you being here, and you'll have 7 minutes once you get up to the podium.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Good evening, Mayor Salonen, members of council and staff. I'm Marg Roll, the president of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, North Waterloo Region Branch. The ACO started in Toronto in 1933 and grew to 18 branches in various parts of Ontario. Our branch was established in 1980 and is active in the municipalities north of Highway 401. Our mandate is keep, fix, and reuse. I have also been active on the Heritage Wilmot Committee and have participated in helping with information for the Municipal Heritage Register. The North Waterloo Region Branch would like to support the motion by Councillor Martin to support the ACO in their request to ask the provincial government to extend the deadline for keeping the properties listed on the Municipal Heritage Register from January the 1st, 2025 to January the 1st, 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Cressman?
Through you, Mayor, I couldn't help smiling because the motto sounded like my farm.
Very good. Any other questions or comments, councillors? All right. Thank you very much for joining us and for delegating this evening.
Could I just say thank you for coming?
Very good. Okay, councillors, do we have a seconder for Councillor Wilkinson will second the motion. Any discussion at this time? Councillor Wilkinson?
Sorry, I jumped, but yeah, through the chair, we've already heard from someone this evening who has studied history, and I myself studied history, and I think it's sort of the theme of the evening is talking about a lot of this, but I think it's important that we do preserve what we have now in front of us in terms of heritage buildings. And if we can further those efforts to call on the government of Ontario to extend this deadline, I think it'd just be a missed opportunity if we didn't. So I'm in favor of this moving forward.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to announcements. I will try and keep it quick, although I have quite a list. I wanted to let everybody know that the first of our 2 electric Zambonis has officially arrived in the township, which is quite exciting news. Although they have a bit more of the upfront cost, they do not have any tailpipe emissions, as well as the long-term costs. Savings are expected to be significant due to lower fuel and maintenance costs, as well as I hear that they're very quiet, although I don't know if kids will appreciate that or not based off of the one tour we did with the grade 5s. The Zamboni was the highlight of the whole facility. I also wanted to mention last weekend, the Heritage Day on February 17th, which I know actually a few of our delegates mentioned. And so Heritage Wilmot did a fantastic job hosting Heritage Day 2024 at the New Dundee Community Centre on Saturday, February 17th. And it was wonderful to see over 15 exhibitors who provided information to the over 160 people and guests who came to the event, including one of our own councillors had his own booth set up, Councillor Martin, and I believe almost all of council was able to pop in and see the great work that Heritage Wilmot, as well as councillors and our staff did. So thank you very much to everyone involved. It was a fantastic event, and I look forward to what you guys have planned for 2025. Also, this past weekend was Family Day on February 19th, and the Township's Family Day events at the Wilmot Recreation Complex were a success. Apparently, the facilities were filled with a steady flow of families for the entire day, with a combination of Township activities and private rentals. So thank you to everyone who was involved in that. A upcoming event on March the 23rd is an Easter egg swim, and that's on Saturday, March 23rd. Families are invited to hunt for Easter eggs and win prizes at the Wilmot Recs Complex pool. The first time slot is 3:30 p.m. and the second time slot is 4:30 p.m. and each child will leave with a guaranteed prize. It is $10 per child. Adults may pay regular admission or can bring a food donation item for the Wilmot Family Resource Centre. Please go to wilmot.ca for more information, or of course you can call the township office or pop in. And our Community Services Master Plan Workshop is coming up on March the 26th. This will not be the last time that you hear me talking about it, but the Township has launched the development of our new Community Services Master Plan. This master plan will guide our decision-making across all aspects of parks, recreation, from playground facilities to everything in between, including rec centers. The community is invited to hear what input you want to provide on this on Tuesday, March the 26th at 6:30 p.m. at the Wilmot Recreation Complex. Again, more details are provided at wilmot.ca, or of course reaching out to the township. And this will not be the only engagement, but it will be the start to our community engagement process on this, which I know we're looking forward to. Lastly, I just wanted to make a quick note that this upcoming Wednesday is Pink Shirt Day, which is to stand up against bullying across Canada. So I would encourage everyone to wear their pink shirts. And councillors, do any of you have announcements? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, just bring your attention to March 17th. The New Dundee Board of Trade are having their annual pancake breakfast, starting at 10 in the morning and going till 1 in the afternoon. So pancakes, real maple syrup, Director Okrafka, I don't think it's yours, but it's certainly real, and scrambled eggs and sausage. That's the menu of the day, and coffee and juice. So just want to bring you that to your attention.
Very good. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen, for mentioning Heritage Day. I just wanted to thank three of the staff. Others may have worked on it as well, but Sherry and Taylor and Cameron were there all day for Heritage Day, and I really appreciate the staff helping out and coming that day. Also wanted to mention that a highlight for me in Black History Month was buying a t-shirt about Emancipation Day. Maybe sometime I can wear it, maybe even on Emancipation Day or sometime close to the council meeting. So make a comment on that.
Very good. Any other final announcements? Seeing none. Confirmatory bylaw, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And lastly, adjournment. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadoo. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you to everyone who joined us and stuck around all the way to the end, and have a great evening.